Good evening. Welcome to the May 22nd, 2012 meeting of the City of Lake Forest Plan Commission. I'm Jack Reisenberg, Chairman of the Commission, and at this time I'd like to introduce the other members of the Commission. To my far right, Commissioner Anderson. To his left, Commissioner Culbertson. And to my immediate right, Commissioner Newman. To my far left, Commissioner Carris. And to my immediate left, Commissioner Shaw. And before I introduce Ms. Zerniak, I'd like to mention that this meeting is the last meeting for Commissioner Newman and Commissioner Shaw. And I'd very much like to thank them for their service, both thoughtful service and committed service to the City of Lake Forest. So, saying that, from the city, Ms. Zerniak is with us here tonight. The first, here we go, I lost my agenda. The first item before the commission this evening is a continued public hearing and action and a request for a special use permit approving a new campus master plan for Lake Forest, for Northwestern Lake Forest Hospital. This is the fifth in a series of Plan Commission meetings to consider a request from Northwestern Lake Forest Hospital for a special use permit adopting a new hospital campus master plan. Are there any ex parte contacts or conflicts of interest by members of the, by commissioners?
As advised in prior hearings, my firm does some work for the Northwestern Hospital downtown. I advised council, city council of such, and was advised that I have no conflict of interest and can sit through these proceedings.
Okay. Petitioner? Mr. McAfee?
Hi. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, commissioners. Thank you. I feel like this is my fifth command performance, at least that's what I like to think of it as, and I just would like to start off our presentation this evening by thanking you. Thanking you for your guidance and support throughout this process. We know it's taken a lot of energy and focus from everybody. I also would like to thank the City of Lake Forest. They've been exceptionally helpful in guiding us through a project of this complexity and have really steered us in what we believe has been a great direction to refine a plan that we think will really be exceptional for our community. And lastly, the community at large. I can tell you that through the last few years that we've been working on advancing this initiative, that I've got countless letters and side conversations and direct support in advancing this project, because I do believe that we recognize how important it is to everybody in our community. I also hope tonight that you can recognize that we have listened. We've listened to our neighbors, to the city, to your guidance, and we've continued to refine this plan to a point where we do believe that it is responsive to many of those issues, and I think held in aggregate and as we delve through some of the additional detail tonight, that'll become very, very obvious. I also think that it's important to note that I personally, and I know that of our board, feel incredibly privileged to advance a project of this scope and scale. We know how important good health care and education is to any community, and to be in a position where we will be advancing a project that will truly position Lake Forest and Northwestern, quite frankly, to stabilize and put our hospital in a position for being viable for another 100 years is truly an exceptional opportunity to lead. And in fact, I think that if I were to speak to many of my peers, I'm put in a very enviable position. So finally, I also think that it's important to recognize that I really do have one single motive, and that is to advance a project that we all feel is consistent with the standards of not only the best health care that could be available to our community, to our neighbors, but to do it in a way that is also embraced by our community. So with that, I'd like to delve into some of those outstanding items that we discussed a bit last time in a bit more detail, and then, of course, be open for questions. So those elements being traffic, building height, refining the uses so we could have a little bit more understanding and of what could evolve on this campus over time, and then also discuss a bit about the open space and setbacks on the campus. Forging ahead on traffic, we do believe that we've addressed the concern about Burton Drive being accessible to the campus, both to future vehicular as well as bicycle traffic, so we have eliminated that on the plan. We're no longer proposing the alignment of Westmoreland with Chiltern Drive. We are also looking to mitigate the impact on Deerpath Road with the improved access off of Route 41 with the right in, right out, with the whole intent of relieving access off of Deerpath Road, which we recognize is important to everybody. Also, we have committed to conduct a post-Phase 1 traffic study on this campus, so that before we advance anything in the future, that we will come back and validate our traffic counts. I could tell you that we have been aggressive or conservative, I would say, in our forecast, but we also want to make sure that we create an environment that's very safe. With respect to building height, restricted areas of the campus so that it is contains the higher elements on the project. We believe that we've maximized the distances and transitions and built appropriate perimeters, and we'll delve into that. And then work tirelessly to reduce the visual view scape of this project moving forward. A little bit more focus on our traffic concerns. As you can see from this diagram, we are adding 2 access points, which we believe will have a marked increase or decrease in demand off of the Deerpath access point and increase throughput. Secondly, as I had mentioned, we are no longer proposing to move this road and align it with Chiltern, so I think that we can avoid any concern associated with advocating for any cross traffic, which we don't think will be the case. And then, of course, closing Burton Drive, and for those that aren't familiar, that's this road right here. So I think the concern was that that would be tied in a way that would be at the expense of privacy and access for our neighbors. With respect to traffic study, the summary, the roadway improvements, improving access off of Route 41, second access off of Waukegan, adding a turn lane so that we could access the Deerpath entrance so that it doesn't slow westbound traffic off of the Westmoreland or Deerpath Road. Projected volumes, again, I think it's also very important to repeat the fact that this is a replacement hospital. We've been on this campus for 75 years and in the community for over 110. The intent here is to replace what we have today. In fact, since 2008, our volume's been relatively flat with respect to inpatient activity, so we believe that a 10% increase with the new hospital is a conservative estimate, and that in addition, with the medical office building, a 10% increase as well there. A 25%, however, counter reduction on demand of traffic using the Deerpath access because of us moving the campus to the northern section of the campus. The long-term build-out, again, this is difficult to forecast, but we believe that our statistics indicate half of the demand for the campus would come from the southern portion of the campus if built out, only after, again, validating our Phase 1 project. With that, a 9% increase in the current Waukegan Road volume traffic and a 0 to 5% increase in Deerpath when taken into consideration with the reduction. Burton and Children Drives, again, no cut-through alignment. And Gage's Lane, we validated that the service levels remain the same. In fact, I think it's also important to reinforce that, that we know we've had these counts validated through a peer review. Height. We've indicated, I know this graphic is not new, but we've noted these green areas as the entry points on the campus. And the higher portions of the campus, centrally located, significant setbacks from our current locations, again, the main hospital being here. So, in fact, when compared to some of the existing residents and our existing asset today, you're in situations where you're roughly less than 100 feet, whereas as we move north with the main mass of the building is going to be more than 700 feet. We are increasing our buffers, which I'll speak to in a bit more detail, surrounding the campus all the way around. In fact, significantly, 2 times. We're going to limit the taller elements to the center of the campus, and we also recognize that the height of a building also has to be taken into context. There's a beautiful shot of our Young Hall. So we definitely understand how architecture is viewed in this community, and we want to make sure that this view is roughly, I think it's 425-foot setback. To give you a reference point, a building in this zone is roughly anywhere from 1,300 to 1,500 feet back from Waukegan Road. So roughly 3 times the distance on the view of this building, which of course has an impact, and that's without the berming. Remaining uses, Mr. Chairman, you had asked us to really tighten up some of the reuses so that we could be more specific, so not reference just retail. We've actually noted that we do have education and research in our mission, and we think that those may be ideal reuse potentials on the South Campus, but that we are committed to no standalone retail or hotel functions. Open spaces, probably one of the most prominent points in our presentation, I think, reinforces our commitment to making sure that this campus is maintains a campus feel, and that is 65%, or 104 acres, we're committing to open space on this campus. 28.7 of those acres are in no-build zones. Landscaped entrances that truly maintain the beauty of the campus. Land banking parking so that we could tightly integrate parking in a coordinated fashion and be responsive to some of the feedback that we've received from our friends at Open Lands. And then we also have really worked to push the buildings east and having the support parking to the west so that we have adequate buffers with our new asset. Open space, again, 65% with 104 acres. Community benefit, you could see these, oops, I don't know what happened there. So a 250-foot setback here, bermed areas, moving this from 125 to 200 feet. We've looked to move the building east and really have enhanced landscape areas off of all these perimeter points. The other area that we've responded to is the Health and Fitness Center with some feedback. Our neighbors suggested that perhaps we consider moving the expansion to the east as opposed to the western part, so we believe that makes some good sense. The Lane-Lorraine neighbors have particular concern because, of course, they've been used to looking at an open field for some time with a less significant buffer. So today, to the right, you can see that we have a 120-foot buffer. We've actually committed to extending that to 200 feet and also taking out a good portion of the parking lot and moving that north to help further insulate our impact. So we do think that we've been very responsive. Again, we've called out sample berms, but we look forward to working with our neighbors and partners in determining exactly how to best insulate our neighbors in a way that they feel is helpful to them. And this is just a graphical shot of, again, reinforcing our commitment to making sure that we have a beautiful campus that reinforces all of our goals. Setback areas that were noted as concerns, again, I think it's just helpful to reinforce that our current setbacks are at 14.2 acres, and we've doubled that to 28.7. We have also increased the distance from the hospital anywhere from 600 feet to our neighbors to the north to more than 1,500 feet off of Waukegan Road. So we do think that we've found the right sweet spot to mitigate the visual viewshed impacts of the hospital. That concludes some of the drill down on that, and I guess I'm open for questions.
I think we'll go to Kathy first, and then we'll come back to you, Mr. McAfee. In the process, I neglected to swear in anybody who's going to speak on behalf of the petitioner or anybody who's going to provide any public commentary. So if you are, would you please stand? Even if you're thinking about it, you might want to do that. Do you solemnly declare and affirm that the testimony you are about to give is true and correct to the best of your knowledge? Thank you. Kathy, now we'll ask you for a review of issues by staff.
Thank you, Chairman Reisenberg, members of the Plan Commission. As you noted, Chairman, this petition is before you tonight for the 5th time. You saw this first in September for information only, and even at that time, city staff had been working with the hospital project team for over a year. This really has been a good process. It's been a good, solid process. From the staff perspective, we always discourage projects from coming forward too soon. We feel that this project came forward at the right time. It came forward to you in September for information. It came forward to you in December when you opened the public meeting, and then you continued into the new year having public hearings on this. You've provided a lot of direction. You've had a lot of deliberation. You've heard about the changes to the master plan, and the changes to the plan since it was originally conceived have really been very significant. The staff report has pulled from your comments and direction, has pulled from comments heard at a 3rd Ward meeting, has pulled from much of the correspondence you've received, from other testimony you've heard, and really tried to balance all of the issues. And I'll talk about the conditions and the staff recommendation in a moment. This project, this master plan, in staff's opinion, is ready for action tonight. It really is the first step of the rehabilitation of the hospital campus, and what you have before you is a very well thought out, very solid plan. What is a master plan? I know we've talked about this before, but just to review it one more time, what is a master plan, and what is a master plan not intended to do? This master plan is intended to be a framework for future decisions about the rehabilitation of the campus. Approval of this master plan by the city does not in any way allow the hospital to go out and start digging a hole tomorrow or even in 3 months. At your direction, the conditions actually speak about a follow-up process that is going to continue to keep the Plan Commission involved. What this master plan does, if it's recommended by you tonight and forwarded to the City Council and adopted there, this master plan establishes the boundaries as they exist today of the hospital campus. It clarifies the uses that are intended on the campus, and in the master plan they're broken down into North Campus, Central Campus, and South Campus. The master plan importantly establishes setbacks that are greater than any previously contemplated for this property. In your packet, you do have a copy of a memorandum of understanding. I believe that was from 2005. I might have the year wrong, but that was a memorandum of understanding that was entered into the last time the hospital did a major project. That memorandum of understanding was intended at that time, without really any idea of how the campus would build out, to put some parameters around development, the master plan that you have in front of you meets or exceeds everything that was contemplated in that master plan, and in some cases exceeds the parameters in that memorandum fairly significantly. The master plan requires, as part of phase 1, significant roadway improvements. The connection from the campus to Route 41 has been something that's been talked about in this community for at least 10 years. When the hospital first came to us, beginning of our discussion, we said, if you're going to do something with the hospital campus, you need to get the state on board and you need to move forward with the connection to Route 41. That was essential, and that is a key piece of this project, and it is in phase 1, and the groundwork has already been laid for that project with the state. What this master plan does not do, it does not present detailed plans. You don't have construction drawings, you don't have architectural drawings, you don't have landscape plans. Buildings haven't been designed, parking structures haven't been designed, the exact treatment of the setback areas haven't been designed, nor should they be. This is somewhat like a tentative subdivision, where before this comes back before you, we're going to spend the next 18 months to 2 years working with the hospital project team and resolving those details. So the master plan, again, is intended to be a framework for future decisions. It does not answer all the questions that have been asked to date, and it simply can't. It's not intended to be that kind of a document. You do have a staff report in front of you. You have a recommendation from the staff to recommend approval of the master plan and forward that to the City Council subject to conditions. You have an extensive list of conditions in your staff report, 24 conditions. And as I said earlier, those conditions, for the most part, come from you. They come from the discussion you've had, the questions that have been presented to you, and they really try to not only set some limitations, but at the same time provide some flexibility for creativity. I think what I've heard from the Plan Commission and from the community is this is a very, very significant project for our community, and we have the opportunity here to create something that will really add to the legacy of Lake Forest. And we all want to do it right, but we need to balance the needs. We don't want to compromise a cutting-edge replacement hospital by some limiting factors. So the conditions are intended to try and strike the right balance of limitations and flexibility. In response to the Plan Commission's interest in not letting go of this project and not just giving approval and then letting the hospital go away for 18 months and 2 years, do their design work, and then come back to the city, what is recommended in the first condition, and I won't go through all 24, but in the first condition, a process is recommended, really based on a process that was used for the city's very own, very large capital project when we rehabilitated the water treatment plant a number of years ago. Then Mayor Kerr appointed an independent technical and design advisory committee, and that group got into the details. The group didn't have any approval authority, but the process that is proposed to you tonight is that that same kind of advisory group would be appointed. It would be appointed by the city manager. That group would work closely with city staff, really be advisory to city staff, would work closely with the hospital project team, and at appropriate points in the process, the detailed plans would be brought back to the Plan Commission for verification that those plans are consistent with the approved master plan. So you have an opportunity to do a double check and give that nod of verification. So that is the process that's recommended. Just to summarize some of the other conditions, a number of conditions are related to road improvements, a significant part of this master plan, and those road improvements, as I mentioned earlier, are part of phase 1, and those will be fully funded. The specific road improvements that are proposed will be fully funded by the hospital. The conditions also talk about building design and height. Height has been an area of real focus, and from the staff perspective, I think you have a strong height zone graphic now in front of you. I think that differs from what you had before. And that height zone sets height ranges. It doesn't mean everything in a certain area is going to be 45 feet or 81 feet or 52 feet, but what it means is within those areas there will be an opportunity to achieve a building within the range of height specified. In addition, you have a central core area that has an overlay district that allows for specific building elements to extend higher than the main mass of a building. I would just caution the Plan Commission about trying to tighten down that height too far. We know it's important, but at this point in the process, it's difficult to say that a building of 75 feet would be more compatible with the community than a building of 81 feet. What really is important is the fact that you have extraordinary setbacks that are proposed as part of this plan. A building that will likely be somewhere in the range of 1,000 feet setback from Waukegan Road far exceeds any setback we have for any building anywhere in the community. The building height really needs to be judged in the context of the overall site, the setbacks, the location of other buildings, the creation of landscaping, berms, open space. So I believe that the condition presented to you provides limitations, and frankly limitations that the hospital is not entirely comfortable with, but it provides limitations but also flexibility that I think will allow us through this design development process to really achieve the right design for all parties. Finally, you have conditions that speak to financial impacts. As we would with any project, we will look very carefully at this project. And the hospital is a bit different, a lot different than a residential development. We know that a residential development on this property would put significant demands on city services and other community services. That's not the case with the hospital, but nevertheless, there is a process in place that will evaluate that on a continuing basis throughout as the phases unroll. And then finally, the last two conditions speak to when the master plan itself would need to come back to the city for amendment, or a new master plan would need to be adopted. If uses are proposed at some point in the future over the long term that are not consistent with what is in the master plan, a master plan amendment will be required. If the campus boundaries were to change, an amendment to the master plan would be required. So master plans are dynamic. They guide our decisions in the short term and in the longer term, but they're not intended to answer all the questions or give us all the details. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'll turn it back over to you. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Now we would like to have questions or requests for clarification from commissioners to petitioner staff. We'll start with Mr. Carris. No questions. Mr. Shaw. Mr. Shaw.
I don't have any questions right now. Excuse me.
Mr. Newman.
I just have one for petitioner. You mentioned in your presentation a 1,500-foot setback. Was that the minimum in any direction, or was that in one specific direction that was increased since the last meeting?
Yeah, that was the distance approximately, depending upon the final geometry and placement in that 81-foot zone. So that was I think it's an estimate. It's the line between Waukegan Road and the building face.
Okay, that's all I have. Thank you.
Commissioner Culbertson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do have several questions, if I may. With respect to, this is for staff, with respect to the forecasted traffic generation, to summarize, I believe we're looking at 20% after phase 1, a 25% increase from what exists today after phase 2, and somewhere in the future after the final phase, a potential 50% increase in circulation.
Those are the projections. Importantly, you do have a condition, and Mr. McAfee also referenced that the condition will actually require, after the build-out of phase 1, which is the replacement hospital and the additional medical office building, that a traffic study will be required at that time to verify that the projections were accurate, to help us understand if, in fact, the traffic is using the ingress and egress as anticipated. So there will be checkpoints throughout, prior to the build-out of phase 2 and the build-out of the future phase. But yes, the projections have been verified. by the city engineer and by a third-party consultant.
Okay, so the independent consultant was not the hospital's consultant?
That's correct.
Okay. And you find these conclusions acceptable or consistent?
The engineers do, yes.
Okay. And the hospital will pay for all road improvements? Is that?
The hospital will pay for all of the road improvements that were mentioned. The exception to that is there is also a condition that requires the hospital to fund I'm going to get the name wrong, I'll call it the conceptual intersection design study, and that's not what it's called in the condition, for the Route 41 and Deerpath intersection. Improvement of that intersection has been something the city has talked to the state about forever. And this project really gives the community the leverage to go to the state hand in hand with the hospital and say, we need you to put this on our radar screen. It certainly isn't a project that's going to be done in 5 years, but the initial study that we need to even be able to do that, that will be done by the hospital at the initiation of the city, and that will be fully funded by the hospital. The improvement of that particular intersection will not be funded by the hospital. That will be an IDOT project. But yes, all the other road improvements are the hospital's money.
Moving on to the maximum heights. The staff report mentions a height zone graphic and a maximum height overlay zone. I'm a little confused. Is there a stipulation or a cap, a maximum allowance on the height of the tallest building element in the proposed hospital building?
Yes. The height element that's, maybe you could put that up there. The overlay that covers the core of the campus, that green area, I don't know if you have the maximum height in that area is 81 feet. There is a caveat that although we understand that the Plan Commission wants every effort to be made to fit the mechanicals under that 81 feet, there is a caveat that as we work through this design development process, we do our studies, we do our analysis, if the mechanicals need to rise up above that, and they can do so appropriately, be appropriately screened, be appropriately set back from the building edge, then that can be accepted through the verification process. But yes, the main building heights in that core area are 60 feet. So the main mass of the building could not exceed 60 feet. The 81-foot overlay district allows individual elements of the building to extend as tall as 81 feet. Does that answer your question?
It's getting close. But there is a potential to exceed. Well, first of all, what was the previous proposed height of the primary structure? Was it 92 or something like that?
I believe, even standing here today, the hospital would like the ability to have mechanicals exceed 81 feet, and they would like to know that they could extend mechanicals up to as high as 96 feet. These conditions push on that. The hospital is not, and I don't want to speak for you, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't believe as we sit here today that the hospital project team is entirely comfortable with these conditions. I think they would be more comfortable if we acknowledge that above the 81 feet, the mechanicals could rise up to 96. However, we heard the commission loud and clear that you would like all possible avenues to be explored to get those mechanicals under the 81 feet. But I will tell you today that that may not be possible, and it's important that we reserve the right to, through the verification process, to come back and have that discussion and explain why that isn't possible.
So the overlay zone and the staff report do not contain a maximum allowable height for the tallest potential building element?
For the building element, yes. The building element cannot exceed 81 feet. It may come in at 80 feet. It does not set a specific requirement for the mechanicals other than the condition does state that every effort shall be made to include the mechanicals under the 81 feet. But no, there is nothing in the report that says mechanicals can rise 5 feet above 81 feet or 10 feet above 81 feet. We left it at, the goal was to try and keep them as low as possible.
But as I understand it, it could potentially rise 25 feet above 81 feet, hypothetically. I mean, there is no ceiling that's been prescribed at this.
Any
this point.
plan will come back to the Plan Commission for approval. So theoretically, if during the design process of 2 years, the building height was at a maximum of 81 feet, and there was some extraordinary unknown mechanical system that needed to rise 25 additional feet,
Well,
theoretically, but I think that's not,
then let me ask the petitioner, do you believe that under any circumstances, you would not exceed 96 feet, including mechanicals?
We do not believe, in fact, I think it's very important for you to know that we will make absolutely every effort to minimize. In fact, earlier question was, where did we start? Before we advanced it to the concept to the Plan Commission, the architectural recommendations came out, were at 140 feet. We clearly said, you know what, guys, you need to do better than that. And that proposed a complete vertical stack of the patient towers. So we split the patient towers and thoughtfully reviewed the elevation. And what's being proposed is a five-story structure. It's enormously expensive, but we also believe that with some solid engineering work, we can move the major air handling cooling tower elements to the lower levels and therefore reduce the amount of height above the 81 feet. But I can assure you that we were very sensitive that we came forward with a concept that really attempted to bring it down, but also balance patient safety. So let me just give you one example where we may be a bit challenged related to a vertical element on top of the 81 feet. Traction elevators. This project and the speed of moving patients vertically is too important to put under a piston elevator. Everyone's been in a hydraulic elevator. The importance of moving a patient from an inpatient room to the operating room or anywhere to those key areas, speed is of the essence. In order to do that, we do need some vertical element to support the traction support for that elevator shaft. So that might be one example where we'd have to move it up. Another may be
Above 81
above
feet.
the 81, but again, certainly not 25. In fact, I feel very confident that we would not need to be above 96. I mean, I feel reasonably comfortable to say that, but I also feel that that is absolutely, the 81 is the absolute minimum we feel in order to maintain that safe environment. The other element that is challenging, that's unique to a hospital relative to any other construction, is the air handling elements and the amount of volume of air from a purification standpoint, so that we have adequate floor-to-ceiling heights, which is what's pushing us up a bit more than what you might be used to in other designs.
Thank you. Question for staff. In the staff recommendation, item number 20 discusses financial impacts on the community. And it's recommended that the hospital shall be responsible for its proportionate share of costs related to any new public infrastructure or any improvement or upgrades to existing public infrastructure that may be required as a direct result of the rehabilitation of the campus. The operative word there is proportionate share. How is a proportionate share of those costs expected to be determined?
I'll use an example that isn't real, I'm just making it up. If 5 years from now there's a determination that a water main in Waukegan Road needs to be upsized, in part to serve the hospital, which isn't the case because we've already looked at that, but also in part to serve additional residential development. We would then do a calculation and determine how much of that excess capacity that needed to be constructed could be directly attributed to the hospital and how much is just needed to serve the rest of the community.
And how would something like that be enforced or imposed upon the hospital? Is there going to be some agreement, some written agreement, or?
The conditions of approval, if they go forward as recommended, will be incorporated into an ordinance that would be adopted by the city. Prior to the issuance of building permits for all sorts of projects, we do assess impact fees that are directly related to costs incurred by the city. So this would be documented in an ordinance. If there was some determination at the front end that there was some impact on increased city service or some impact on city facilities, then we would create a memorandum of understanding or some document to that effect, or it would be triggered by a building permit. Let me also say that we have looked carefully at, in the review of this master plan, all city departments have been involved. And we have looked carefully at impacts on service, carefully at impacts on existing facilities, capacity on existing facilities, and there's been no cost that hasn't already been identified in the master plan through transportation improvements that we have identified. Importantly, with respect to stormwater, for instance, the work that the hospital is doing on its own campus is actually freeing up some capacity in the city's system to allow us to better serve some of the adjacent residential area. So the hospital is doing work right now above and beyond that which might be required strictly as part of their project.
Back to the assessment of reasonable impact fees, if any, are required. Again, I'm not quite sure I understand how they would be levied, how they would be enforced. Is there a mechanism for dispute resolution? Is there some kind of written agreement?
Impact fees, the assessment of impact fees is provided for in the city code. There's impact fees for all sorts of different developments. As part of building permit fees, there's assessments that support the water treatment plant. So the council has already adopted a set of impact fees. This project will be judged against that standard set of requirements, but over and above that, this project will also be scrutinized to see if there's some unanticipated consequence.
And finally, well, two more questions. Within the purview of considering a special use permit for a master plan, is security within that framework, or is that to be considered by others than the Plan Commission?
Security to assure completion of construction?
No, security with respect to the security of folks who live around the hospital or on the campus, given the fact that there is an anticipated potential 50% increase in circulation or traffic to the campus over the coming years. And as we kind of go from less of a community hospital to more of a regional hospital, I suspect that there will be more visitors that come from outside Lake Forest or Lake Bluff to the hospital. I've heard it mentioned by several correspondents that there's a security concern, and I just want to make sure that it's addressed.
It would not be inappropriate for the commission to add a condition that spoke to security. I'll take a few minutes to think about that, but if you want something that calls attention to that,
it may be as simple as just monitoring the situation and offering the opportunity for some future action if necessary. But if it's within our purview, it might be worthy of consideration. Finally, the staff report contains a recommendation for a technical and design advisory committee. Could you just take a minute to review how that would be assembled and how it would work with the commission, the petitioner, city council, the community?
Sure. Normally what would happen under this process is after approval of the master plan, the petitioner, whoever it might be, would go away and develop their plans. We've heard a lot of concerns, we've heard a lot of interest, and it seems like with this project, given its scope and its significance, it's important for the city and the hospital to continue to have an ongoing relationship, whether they want to or not. But the process would be, if the council approved the process, my expectation is that they would direct the city manager to appoint an advisory committee. I would expect that that committee would maybe have five to six members on it. That committee would serve as advisory to staff. They would not be designing this project. They do not replace the hospital project team. The hospital project team would go away, do their work, and we would work with them to identify appropriate check-in points. We would bring the advisory committee in along with the entire hospital staff, and that advisory committee would be in place to challenge the hospital, to provide direction, to give them early input. And then as the different pieces of the plan come forward, as the phase 1 plan is developed, or maybe some part of the phase 1 plan, if phase 1 is broken up into 2 elements, that detailed plan will be brought back to the Plan Commission. The staff recommendation would be informed and directed by that advisory committee. So the advisory committee itself does not add another regulatory layer. It really is a technical advisory committee, and it did work very successfully with the water treatment plant. And I think that's why it seemed to make sense with this project. And importantly, it allows the Plan Commission to build on. You've spent a lot of time on this project. You've been involved in it since last September, and it really allows the process to benefit from your continued involvement, from your knowledge, and I think it, in the end, will result in a process that is fair and appropriate and timely for the hospital. It allows further public input as these matters come back to you, and then it allows a verification that any detailed plans are consistent with the master plan.
Thank you, Kathy. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Commissioner Anderson.
A couple of questions. Let me first start with the petitioner. We talk about this building rehabilitation as being a replacement hospital.
Yes.
Could you remind us again, when we talk about a replacement hospital, is it really replacing in effect, generally the same number of beds? And are we ending up with, in effect, from an inpatient perspective, the same set of services? Now, admittedly, I know we're trying to expand outpatient services in various ways and services beyond that, but is the actual hospital itself coming up with a similar number of beds, and how is that playing out in the plan?
Yes, the proposed is that we're not adding beds. I mean, it's also important, I think, to remind the commission that we need to take this now to, assuming we're in agreement and we proceed, we need to go through a 2-step process with the Illinois Health Facility Planning Board, which is it's a body that needs to approve any major healthcare construction project in the state and demonstrate that there is the demand to support any number of beds that are being proposed on this project. We do feel that we've got a good case given the age and obsolescence of many of the patient rooms, but as it relates to any incremental add, truthfully, it's a pretty big hurdle. And in fact, we also are not convinced that it makes good sense. I had mentioned earlier that we haven't seen a spike in volumes. In fact, in the last year, we've actually seen a significant decline in inpatient and outpatient utilization. So the 10% forecast is what we believe is a bit of an aggressive number from a growth standpoint, but we think it makes good sense because we do recognize that with the new facility at Northwestern grade that it could increase demand to countervail that downward pressure. With respect to the types of services and beds, it's really comparable. We do anticipate just the demographics and the investments in distinctive clinical programs in cardiology and in oncology specifically, and neuroorthopedics, that we would hope that we can perform more of those procedures here, and as opposed to having people leave our community for some of those services. So that'll also, but in short answer to your question, it's a comparable number of beds that we're proposing.
And that's the case as we talk about phase 1 and
Correct.
phase 2?
Yeah, we had asked, we'd been asked by the city to, and the commission to give a long-term build-out scenario. So the concept of moving with another tower to the north and then fitting out the, or reusing the south campus, what we've committed to is not increasing the density over what's there today. Understanding that it's impossible to predict completely future demand, but the phase 2 includes a complete fit-out, and those numbers reflect a complete fit-out of the campus.
And just to be clear, the reason I'm asking the question is, I think there's a perception, at least, that what is happening here is a significant change. That we're going from a community or communities hospital to a regional hospital or regional center. So can you comment on
Sure.
that? Because I think
Sure.
there's a fear that
Yeah.
suddenly we're
Yeah.
trying to build Northwestern
Yeah.
Memorial of Northern Illinois
Right.
or something.
No, and I could say that truthfully, it's a misnomer even to refer to a hospital today as a community hospital, especially one in a major metropolitan area. We draw today from McHenry County, southern Wisconsin, and into northern Cook today. We serve, 1 million people. We expect with Northwestern Memorial downtown that the linkage between the two institutions would provide, and in fact, I think I've mentioned in the past, the intent is to also improve access for outpatient care, which is, quite frankly, today, 2/3 of our business is outpatient, closer to communities in which those services are rendered. We do, though, need inpatient beds for those services and situations where a patient needs to be admitted and for more advanced surgical procedures. So, in fact, we also would expect, given healthcare reform and some of the challenges, that hospitals that haven't served a large enough area simply become irrelevant. They can't be supported under the future reimbursement structure, which is why it's so important for us to make sure that we're tied in. So, I don't want to go on forever, but hopefully I answered your question.
That helps, I think, yeah. For Kathy, when we read the staff report, there's a couple of important conclusions that I found in that. One would be that we indicate from the staff report that as I interpret it, the increased traffic pattern and an increased traffic volume, we believe can actually be supported by whatever planned improvements are being considered as part of the master plan. And so that's one, and also I think that there was a clear sense from at least the conclusions from staff that the perimeter barriers, setbacks, buffers were also a significant improvement. So can you comment on those two? Because I think those are, they're still, I think it's what, in my mind, it says on those two issues, and I'm going to putting aside the height issue, those two issues, it feels like there's been significant change, improvement in the master plan.
The traffic study and the traffic projections have been looked at very carefully. And for phase 1, the engineers are very comfortable that the proposed improvements, the connection to Route 41, the improvements to the lanes at Westmoreland and Deerpath, and the improvements on Waukegan will support and in fact will offload traffic from Deerpath, which is significant. The forecasted traffic for the later phases also has been verified, but importantly, those are projections. Right. And that's why the condition, I think importantly, requires that after the replacement hospital is occupied, after the new medical office is occupied, that we step back and we do another traffic study. There may be other changes in the community. We don't have a whole lot of land left to build out, but there is some. There could be changes in Lake Bluff along Waukegan Road. So after phase 1, doing that traffic study is going to allow us as a community to step back and really assess how much traffic is there and where is it going. Importantly, sooner or later, with or without the hospital, the community does need to look to IDOT to address Deerpath and Route 41. I'll reiterate that this hospital project gives the community leverage that we have never had before and probably will never have again to really push on IDOT in a very concerted way to try and address what currently is an unsafe condition. And when it rains, it floods, and you simply can't get through there. And for a community, for any community, that's just an unacceptable situation. So the traffic issue, we do feel confident that,
Okay.
that what's being done will address phase one.
Just comment on the perimeters, barriers and so forth. Do you think that that's a significant change from what we've talked about before?
It is. With any development, whether it's a 6-acre subdivision or something larger, the Plan Commission knows that it's always difficult for neighbors to see something developed. Importantly, I'll refer again to that memorandum of understanding in 2005 or 2006. At that time, the City Council wanted to be clear that this 40-some acre parcel was part of the hospital campus and would someday be developed for medical and health-related uses. That memorandum established setbacks that were thought to be appropriate at that time. These setbacks exceed that to a significant extent. And within a 200-foot setback, there are incredible things that can be done with berming, with fencing, with walls, with all sorts of different layers and heights of vegetation. And it is not going to make the hospital campus go away, but it will be very significant as a buffer. And I would just add that I think it's also important to note that this parcel right now, it's not like some of the subdivisions you see where what's being proposed is impacting a significant stand of oak trees. This property isn't what Middle Fork Farm across the street was. It's a farm field, and if you stand on Waukegan Road today, I would submit that as you look across that field, that isn't one of the remarkable streetscapes that Lake Forest is known for. You look across the plowed field, and in fact, you look at ComEd poles that are 100 feet and 134 feet as you look toward the railroad tracks. So careful attention that I am confident will be paid to this plan, I believe will enhance the Waukegan Road streetscape in that area consistent with what we have in other parts of Lake Forest.
Okay. I have one last question, just to remind us again. If we think about phase 2 or whatever phase comes after phase 1, so we've improved, if we approve a master plan or a framework here, what's the process then for dealing with phase 2? I mean, for us or for the city?
With the process that is recommended in condition 1, as pieces of this project come forward, the detailed plans will be worked through, and they will be presented back to the Plan Commission for verification that they are in compliance with the master plan. For instance, phase 2, I would expect, and there's been some discussion that maybe in 2015 or somewhere around that time, the hospital will begin to put a little bit more certainty around exactly what educational and research uses will be there. What are we talking about numbers of people? Will those uses serve people who are already on the campus? Will they draw on other people? So that will come back to the Plan Commission for verification that is consistent with the master plan. If something that is not consistent is proposed, there always is an opportunity for amendment of the plan.
Thanks for that.
Okay. Kathy, I have a couple of questions for you and maybe a couple for a petitioner. The master plan, one of the letters that I read referred to the plan as a concept plan. And I thought about that, and I thought, gee, isn't that really a more appropriate title? Even though we may say that continue to say it's a master plan, it's a master plan, it's a master plan. Isn't this really just a concept plan?
It's more than a concept plan. I think there are some components of the master plan that are conceptual, but there are some important, hard limitations in this master plan. And I think the setbacks are an important aspect. We're not saying that the 200-foot setback along Lane Lorraine is conceptual. We're saying that's a 200-foot setback. Conceptually, do we know exactly where the trees are going to be planted or the heights of the berm in that area? No. So I think from that perspective, you could say that pieces of it are conceptual, But this master plan is really more than a concept. It is a very strong foundation for future decisions that are going to be made. It doesn't provide all the details for the plans, but it does box the hospital in and gives the community some assurance that certain things are going to happen. So you could call parts of it conceptual, but I think calling this a concept plan would be a misnomer.
Okay. But it's not far off. Okay, you win. Kathy, at some point, I've always been intrigued by this technical and design advisory committee. And it's at some point this evening, and I don't know where, I've got some specific thoughts on who the members, what the qualifications of the members should be and where they should be drawn from. Where in the agenda is that appropriate to discuss that issue?
I would suggest that if you move through and make a recommendation on the master plan, that it would be appropriate for you also, as a separate recommendation, to recommend that the Technical and Design Advisory Committee include people with certain areas of expertise. And that would be appropriate to forward that as a separate recommendation to the City Council.
Almost as a separate agenda item this evening, an additional separate agenda item.
It doesn't have to be a separate agenda item. It could just be a second motion.
Okay.
If you get to
but
that.
After we kind of reach conclusion on all of the main issues, we'll call.
Yes.
Okay. Kathy, have you had any conversations with petitioner on conservation easements for some of the set-asides and whatever?
We have talked about the need to assure through some mechanism that parts of the campus are preserved open space.
Mm-hmm.
For instance, the setbacks that we've been talking about, the setbacks along Waukegan Road,
Mm-hmm.
The setback along Lane Lorraine. There are different ways to do that. In subdivisions, the Plan Commission often uses outlots. Outlots are preserved as no-build areas. They need to be maintained with, subject to certain landscape plans, but the ownership and the responsibility remains with the petitioner. Conservation easements are another option. Conservation easements can be placed on a plat. They can be held by Lake Forest Open Lands. So I think at this point in the process, as the plan develops, we want to be able to have that discussion about what is the right mechanism. I think there's some opportunity to work with open lands if that's an appropriate entity, but we're not talking about an area that's necessarily connected to other open lands areas, so it may or may not be appropriate.
Mm-hmm. Mr. McAfee, what are your thoughts on conservation easements?
I think
or essentially giving open lands the sleeves out of your vest?
Well, you know, truthfully, we've been heavily engaged with open lands throughout this process, and in fact, this plan reflects a lot of the feedback that we've received, and very good counsel on many elements. With respect to conservation easements, you know, our board and our donor base and our patients, quite frankly, worked hard to accrue these assets. It has to make good, solid sense to give property away from a not-for-profit to another not-for-profit. I think it certainly is not something that is inconsistent with our vision. We are committed to having appropriate buffers. We want this to be a campus-like environment. We're completely committed to that. But as it relates to how we achieve those elements, I think that we'll need to spend some more time and study that.
Okay. Just as a recommendation, as you move forward with open lands, you might want to give them, I use the term sleeves out of your vest. It might be a nice gesture. You don't have to comment, Mr. Becker. Final question again, Mr. McAfee. I was a little surprised at the west end of is it the 160 acre parcel? The 45 in the height zones, right there,
right in here?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. I was surprised that that's 45 feet and not 35 feet. And I guess I'm surprised for two reasons. The first, I didn't think that 45 feet would be necessary. And secondarily, although I know it's outside the purview of the commission, I thought there were covenants on that particular piece of the parcel that limited the height to 35 feet.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, you're correct. In fact, again, that is somewhere in this range today. That is a conservation easement that is tied into the property owners that are in a comparable area across the street. And quite frankly, if we don't get relief, we can't build to that elevation. I think that there's good reasons why that very well may make sense, but until we have the geometry, until we engage an architect, really design the building that we believe makes the most sense, work through those provisions, that's what's noted, but it's something that, quite frankly, to your point, with the deed restriction in place, we can only go to 35.
And 35 just may be okay anyhow. I'm not asking for a commitment, I'm just looking for
Perhaps, but I guess it depends on structured
directionally.
parking and some of the goals that have been advanced. The question is, would it make more sense to have, more dense parking in that area that might challenge the 35-foot elevation? So I think that those are the elements that we'll work through together over the next, year or two.
Okay. I do have one additional question. I'm sorry, I forgot. We've never talked about, and for some reason, I keep coming back to this residential living. Do you anticipate additional residential living or additional residential living facilities?
We have.
On what would be the South Campus, I trust?
Well, today we have our Westmoreland facility, so our long-term care facility is there. We also have accommodations for employees. We also have sleeping accommodations for physicians and residents and medical students and the like. That's what's there today. So, and in fact, that very well may make sense, with respect to reuse. That's something we'll have to study.
Mm-hmm. Again, as you move forward and you go towards, well, we won't talk the research portion, but you expand the educational portion. Correct. I mean, are we talking a dorm, or I'm not pushing back on this.
No.
I don't really have any issue with it. It's more curiosity.
Yeah, no, I don't anticipate. That's not really viewed. It's hard to know exactly what kind of educational component we may want to advance. We do know that, for example, that a family practice residency program may make good solid sense. Classrooms to be able to support that function, perhaps accommodations for those students for rotations. Typically, most students wouldn't choose to want to be on this campus. Excuse me. But for on-call and those types of rotations, it might require overnight accommodations, which we have today.
Right, but there are no planned additional
No.
facilities. Okay, and Kathy, if there were, it would have to come back before the Plan Commission?
Before Phase 2 could proceed, detailed plans would need to come back before the Plan Commission, yes.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Ms. Beck.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. We'll move now to, are any additional questions? Yes.
Yes, given some of your answers to some of these questions, I've got some follow-up. Pivoting off of what the chairman just asked about the residential living facilities, and this was raised, I think, by the chairman at one of the previous meetings, what effect would increased residential living facilities, or I shouldn't say what effect, but how would our inclusionary housing ordinance fit in if they increase the resident living places on the campus?
It depends on what kind of living facilities. The living facilities I heard Mr. McAfee mention have to do with employee housing or accommodating physicians on rotation, Westmoreland long-term care. Those aren't aspects that are that would trigger affordable units under the inclusionary housing ordinance. If there was something else proposed as part of Phase 2, it would come back to the Plan Commission, and that would be a subject of discussion.
So the current use and the current projected use would not trigger the affordable housing ordinance at this time?
No, nothing that I heard described. Our ordinance doesn't contemplate beds for physician rotations. It just isn't something that really relates to the inclusionary housing
No, but
ordinance.
employees could, and that's what my question is.
Employees
More directed
could,
at.
and again, Phase 2 would come back to the Plan Commission. If there was a substantial employee housing component that really was kind of independent living and not more of a,
Hotel motel type of arrangement?
no, not more of accommodations for on-call physicians. I don't know the correct terminology, but yes, if there were standalone units for employees, that could trigger a discussion about inclusionary housing.
But before that could happen, Plan Commission would have to sign off on it then?
Yes.
Okay.
Before Phase 2 can proceed, the details of Phase 2 will need to come back to the Plan Commission to be, for verification that the plans are consistent with the master plan.
Pivot off of consistent with the master plan. Who decides whether it's consistent with the master plan? Given that this is nothing more than a framework and not specific details.
The plans would come back to the Plan Commission for verification that the plans are consistent with the master plan. The Plan Commission would make a recommendation on that to the City Council, and the City Council would verify by resolution that the detailed plans are consistent with the master plan.
But given that we're operating with a skeleton with very little meat on it, how are we going to know whether or not it's consistent with the master plan?
Well, the master plan has a number of limitations in it. It has setbacks, it has height limitations, the height zones, it has uses. So it's a broad framework. The master plan doesn't give you all the specific details. It doesn't tell you exactly what style of architecture Building A might need to be. It doesn't tell you how many trees are going to be planted in the buffer zone, but it does present a framework for those decisions. Certainly Phase 1 of the master plan is more detailed than Phase 2, which is how master plans evolve. So when plans for Phase 2 come back to the Plan Commission, you will receive additional detail, and the master plan will serve as a framework upon which you will rely to determine whether the intent is being complied with as this build-out proceeds. That's why the Plan Commission will be involved in the future. That's why we've added that additional loop, because we did hear that concern from the Plan Commission.
When you just mentioned the more detail in the future phases, I note in the staff report that you talk about Phase 3 expansion without any detail, whereas Phase 2 has some detail and Phase 1 has a lot more detail. Phase 3 says expansion with no detail. What does that mean?
Phase 3, before a Phase 3 could happen, more details would need to be provided to the Plan Commission, and you would look at it to verify that in fact it was consistent with what you intended when you approved the master plan. So we acknowledge that Phases 2 and 3 are not as detailed. Those details will be developed as we do additional traffic studies, as the overall campus build-out evolves.
In response to Mr. Culbertson's questions about what exactly would be the cost associated with, for lack of for a summary of it, the roads, okay? Any kind of work on Westmoreland, any kind of work on Deerpath, any kind of work on Waukegan, and definitely the 41 interchange. I thought I heard you say that the hospital would fund the study for the 41 work, but they wouldn't pay for any of the work?
The intersection of Deerpath and Route 41 really is a different animal than the other road improvements that are talked about. The hospital will fully fund those other road improvements. The improvement of Route 41 and the Deerpath intersection, that is an IDOT project. We would anticipate that IDOT would fund that, perhaps with some community participation. If they look to us for participation, we will certainly look to the hospital for a partnership, but that is a much longer term project. So the requirement that the hospital fund the initial study we need to even get IDOT's attention on that intersection, that is really a special assessment, essentially, that we're putting on the hospital as part of this master plan.
Okay, but when you say they wouldn't pay for any of it, financial impacts number 20 says, the hospital shall be responsible for funding all new private infrastructure and any upgrades to private infrastructure related to the rehabilitation of the hospital campus. In addition, and this is what I'm focusing on, in addition, the hospital shall be responsible for its proportionate share of costs related to any new public infrastructure or any improvements or upgrades to existing public infrastructure that may be required as a direct result of the rehabilitation of the campus. That smells to me like they're going to have money in the 41 work.
We don't know what IDOT would do with 41 and Deerpath. We would hope that IDOT would take that project on and do those improvements. If IDOT were to say to the community, we want you to participate, we would certainly look to the hospital to share in that cost along with other community partners. But the improvement of the intersection of Route 41 and Deerpath is an IDOT project.
But that's not what this says. That's not what this condition says. This condition, the way I read it, sticks the proportionate costs of the hospital's burden of the issues on 41 on their back.
We could certainly clarify that with additional language.
What happens if the state of Illinois, with all its largesse and large amounts of surplus money, decides they can't pay for any of this? Who's going to pay for the impact on the city then?
The improvement of that intersection is a long way off. I think what this project can do for the community is to get this project on IDOT's radar screen. We can certainly look at that language and modify it to make it clear that with respect to that project, the hospital would only play a role depending on, it's just so hard to predict what IDOT would do with that project. But it's certainly a much longer term project, but we can look at that language and modify that.
I guess what concerns me is that you've got no guarantee from IDOT they're going to do anything. They don't have any money to speak of. The state doesn't. It's a long-term project. We could be seeing all kinds of impact on that 41 intersection in the next 5 to 10 years, and statements in this meeting tonight on the record saying, oh no, they're not going to pay for any of that, but language in the condition here that suggests that maybe they would without any definition of how we decide what their proportionate impact is. So who pays for that? The city of Lake Forest then?
We can clarify that language to identify that particular project as an IDOT project. And we can't begin to sit here tonight and
I'm
predict
concerned
how IDOT will
My concern
respond
is
to
saying
that.
it's an IDOT project and IDOT decides it isn't their project. Who's going to pay for the impact when it happens? That's my concern. If there's language in here that suggests that the hospital is going to pay for their proportionate share of the costs, like it says, and that includes the 41 issue if IDOT doesn't pay for it, and how that's going to be determined what their proportionate share is, I think that makes it tighter and more consistent with them paying their proportionate share. I don't know what you would put in there, but relying on IDOT to do something troubles me, because 50% increase in traffic means that 41 issue is going to come sooner rather than later.
And importantly, phase one of this project is fully supported by the improvements that will be done by the hospital. Before phase two proceeds, before the future phases proceed, additional traffic studies will be required and city approval will be required for those phases to go forward.
You indicated that the advisory committee would be working with the staff as an advisory committee to the staff. What authority does the advisory committee have over the staff's recommendation?
The advisory committee would be advisory only.
Okay.
Certainly they could provide a report to the Plan Commission, and throughout the deliberation process, it may be that you want to recommend that a member of the Plan Commission be a representative of that advisory committee, so that you have a link and you have someone that keeps the commission up to date.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Welcome.
One question.
Okay. You too?
Well, Kathy, throughout the process, one of my major concerns has been the height, in addition to some of the other things. And to raise a question around this Technical and Design Advisory Committee. My concern is we do say that it's to verify that the plan is in compliance with the master plan or the future designs, detailed designs. But yet around, and the master plan is prescriptive in certain areas, 250 feet setbacks, and we show where they are, 200 feet in other areas and what have you. But around the height issue, we're talking about recommended heights. What concerns me is we're going to be just sort of kicking the can down the road with regard to the height restriction. If we say that this advisory committee is going to be verifying the intent of the master plan, yet we only have recommended heights as opposed to being prescriptive. How would you address that and that, I guess, confusion on my part?
Actually, in condition
10.
The current version does acknowledge that those height ranges on that height diagram are approved. Those height ranges approved within those designated areas, building heights from 0 to 45 feet, or in that overlay element, 0 to 81 feet. So they're more than recommendations. The plan is prescriptive with respect to height. It allows flexibility within that area, though.
So then if we were to proceed, then we should change the language from recommended building heights to building heights.
It's, actually,
The version I have says recommended here.
it's the old version.
Okay.
There was a new version that came out 2 days later,
Okay.
where there was some, where the recommendations were, well, I'll say, call it wordsmithed.
I stand corrected.
It's
Thank
okay.
you.
Good idea.
Thanks.
Commissioner Newman.
I just had one question about, earlier you had a picture of Young Hall with setback listed at 420 feet. You also had a picture of Barra Old Main. Do you know the setback distance on that from Sheridan Road?
I'm sorry? 480 feet? Oh, I'm sorry, 280 feet.
280. Thank you.
Okay. Can I mercifully go to public testimony? Public testimony? When you come to the podium, if you could please state your name and address. And if everybody could, it might be a long night, if everybody could limit their public testimony to 5 minutes, it would be very much appreciated.
Good evening, Commissioner, members of the board, fellow neighbors. It's a pleasure to speak from a resident's perspective in support of the construction of a new, updated, and technically advanced medical center.
Could we have your...
My name is Amelia Bartholomew. My residence is 825 North Sheridan Road.
Thank you.
I am a wife, a mother of 2 sons, aged 6 and 13, a professor in translational research and bioengineering at the University of Illinois. Many of my professional colleagues are medical experts from several parts of the country. And as a result, I've come to know and expect a very high caliber of medical care for myself and for my family. I just want to share with you a few aspects of my interaction with Lake Forest Hospital. My second pregnancy seemed to be somewhat uneventful until I suddenly began itching uncontrollably. I was seen by Jill Holden and Michael Hubble of Lake Forest OB/GYN Associates, who diagnosed a very rare liver disorder, which they told me would lead to my baby's death if I was not monitored properly. They took the time to outline how they would proceed to monitor me, the specific specialized tests they would do to monitor my liver condition, and they did not hesitate to confirm that they had experience with this condition in the past, and they were confident in their treatment plan. Noticeably shaken with this news, I was a pretty healthy person. I couldn't believe I had this problem. I went to a university because, of course, as a professor, I was going to go to a university, get a second opinion. The strategy that was presented to me was not as thorough. They did not mention the highly specialized blood tests that the physicians at Lake Forest would do to monitor my condition, and they appeared rather unconcerned about this whole process I was going through. Being thoroughly confused as to what approach might be the most realistic, I searched the medical literature myself and found out that the safest approach was the one outlined by the Lake Forest doctors. I thank them for their vigilance, for keeping up to date with the latest diagnostic advances, and for the health of my 6-year-old, who is now healthy. He's happily involved in baseball. He's in the outstanding Mandarin first grade program at the public elementary school, and best of all, these exceptional resources were readily available to me right here in my neighborhood. I didn't have to go far away to get them. We really are quite fortunate to have a high caliber of practicing physicians locally. My other son is a 13-year-old gymnast who has been going to the Olympic Training Center for the last 2 years for his competition in gymnastics. While he was competing in Indianapolis, he took a tumble on the floor event, and though as stoic as he was, he left the floor with tears streaming down his face, complaining of horrible pain in both his wrists. While I was advised to go to the local hospital in Indianapolis for x-rays, I drove the extra half hour to the Children's Hospital of Indianapolis to obtain a pediatric orthopedic consultation. After they x-rayed both his wrists, he was told that they were sprained and we were given splints and sent on our way. Upon improvement and return to his gymnastics, he injured his wrist again, and being close to home, we saw Randy Tack of Illinois Bone and Joint. While he did the x-rays, he told us that the exam was not consistent with only a sprain and insisted that our son get a CT scan. When this exam was not definitive, he insisted on an MRI. These were not studies that were done at the pediatric hospital. These were studies based on the expertise of this physician. All of these tests were performed rapidly here at Lake Forest Hospital on a Saturday afternoon, where there was low staff and yet we had high acuity of attention. They cinched the diagnosis of a fractured wrist, and surprisingly, guess what they discovered? An old fractured wrist, something that they missed at the pediatric hospital. And that is probably because they did not use the advanced technological achievements that they have here to make the adequate diagnosis. So in summary, working with stem cells, nanoparticles, and lasers in my work, I am convinced that there are quite a number of new technologies and medical strategies which will be available for state-of-the-art care. As a resident and as a mother who wants the best for her family close to home, I think it is important for a new and more technologically advanced hospital to be built in our neighborhood. New medical advances are constantly being identified. I can tell you of countless clinical trials that I have been either personally involved in or have been peripherally involved in that are being deployed and will likely require supportive infrastructure to maximize their potential. It is clear to me that we have the expert medical personnel. They are capable of learning about all these new advances and deploying them. Now it is up to our community to give them the permission to build this new center so that these technologically advanced resources will be here in our community to help these talented physicians provide the best available health care for ourselves and our families. That's all I wanted to share with you tonight. Thank you for your time.
And thank you.
Good evening. Good evening. My name is John Dick. I live at 900 Woodbine Lane. I've lived here my whole life so far. I'm grateful for the opportunity to speak to you tonight. I've been on the Open Lands Board for 35 years, and I'm a past chairman of that organization, but I'm not going to speak about open lands tonight. I fortunately have also been involved in hospitals since I was around 30 years old. I served 21 years on the board at Rush University Medical Center. 8 of those were on the facilities committee that designed and built the new tower that is just opened last fall at Rush, 600 beds. I have spent almost now 3 years on the Northwestern Memorial Board as a representative of Lake Forest Hospital, where I had spent 12 years on their board and 18 years on the Strategic Planning Committee, which designed the Grays Lake facility that we enjoy now. In all these years, one can't help but pick up a little bit of knowledge about hospitals and what they do and how they work and how they focus on patient care and saving lives all the time. I truly hope what I say will be helpful in giving the Commission another perspective for this petition. And let me start with an analogy. A good fire department ambulance is built from the inside out. The inside of an ambulance is all about the patient and the speed at which diagnostics and treatments can be applied in a life-threatening situation. I'm sure you all know that. A good hospital is also built just the same from the inside out. It's all about the patient and the speed at which diagnostics and treatments can be applied in life-threatening situations. This is the core of a hospital's purpose. This is what our hospital does and does well, thankfully. With a new hospital plan, here are some inside questions to think about. How many seconds to get from the emergency room to the cardiac cath lab for your heart attack? How many seconds to get from the emergency room to the stroke center for your mother? How many seconds to get your hemorrhaging child or grandchild from the pediatric floor to the operating room? And how many seconds for a nurse to get down the hall to the end of the floor for your wife's flashing room emergency light? All of these can be measured, and there are metrics for all of them. I have not heard any of those questions come up in all the proceedings that we've had. As an example, in hospitals there's a general rule: 3 minutes drop and shock for heart trauma situations. That means you've got 3 minutes. In a 3-story hospital, measuring approximately 500 by 500 for 200 beds, you have 2.8 minutes intra-hospital transfer times. In a 5-story hospital, measuring 250 by 550 for the same beds, 200, you have 1.5 minute intra-hospital transfer times. That's the difference height can make. My personal favorite is the 1.5 minute time. The architectural peer review materials that the commission has would back up these calculations. I'm confident that the commission would want to qualify our hospital to be in the top 10% of life-saving efficiency nationwide. I would applaud adoption of that standard going forward and feel many others silently feel that way too. Some stand here and comment on how the hospital should look from the outside in, and that is fine. I stand here and urge you to put intellectual emphasis on how well the hospital works from the inside out first, and how the inside will save the lives of all ages in all families in our community. Thank you for listening and thinking inside the box.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
My name is Libby Ray, and I live at 917 Barclay Circle at Lake Forest Place, where there are about 370 residents. At the end of April, we met with Jane Griffin and Sarah Burke, both of whom are in marketing at Northwestern Lake Forest Hospital. They were very patient in listening to our concerns about the proposed new hospital to be completed in 2017. We studied the model that was in the hospital, and we discussed our vision of how some modifications would meet our needs. They were kind enough to give us plenty of time, and at the conclusion of our meeting, we spent time touring the surgical area and some of the rooms in the older wing. It was certainly clear to us how important it is for Lake Forest and the surrounding communities to have an up-to-date hospital, one that could readily accommodate modern equipment and more spacious rooms and so on. However, we still have serious concerns about traffic, lighting, the parking lots, the height of the building, which just by the way is twice the height of the main building at Lake Forest Place. That just gives you a little perspective. We moved to Lake Forest Place because the setting felt serene, pastoral almost, as opposed to some of the other retirement homes we considered. Traffic was not an issue when we moved 2 years ago. I see all of this changing with the proposed hospital, which will, I think, be about 50% larger. In closing, I believe that the traffic problems should be studied more, that the hospital should be located farther away from Lake Forest Place and the neighbors who live in the corridor between Deerpath and Waukegan. I think I read tonight that the setback along Westmoreland is only 75 feet, which I do not think is enough. There are too many people living there. The height of the building is certainly of some concern. I do not know whether this advisory committee has been formed, but there was talk of that when we met with these women. My comments are general, but I think that a dialogue between those of us most affected by the new hospital should be ongoing. Thank you.
Thank you. There's a gentleman behind you, and then you're next.
Thank you.
Okay.
Good evening. My name is Jim Kiriakou. I live at 454 Beverly Place in Lake Forest. I've been living here for 12 years. My wife and I moved here 12 years ago. We have 3 children, one at Cherokee, one at Deerpath, and one in high school. And I come to you tonight because I'm a physician. I'm an emergency physician. I work downtown at Northwestern Memorial Hospital. I'm also a professor of emergency medicine and preventive medicine, and I have some training and expertise in public health. So I want to give you a little bit more of perhaps a community perspective on the importance of a quality hospital in a community. So I was taken aback by Mr. Dick's comments. I thought they were great, and I thought I was going to give you a little bit of an inside perspective, but I just want to affirm what he said. I'm not sure the community and the board truly understand the importance of how a hospital is built in terms of delivering quality care. I'll give you an example. I've worked at hospitals before where the CT scanner is several hundred feet away from the emergency department. So you have a patient who's sick in the emergency department and you have to wheel him over to the CT scanner because you have a potential emergency going on. You have the difficulty of providing care for that patient in a distant area away from the emergency department. I can't tell you how many times in my life I've seen bad things happen to patients who are not under the direct supervision of the emergency department because they're off-site. Well, no new emergency department that's built nowadays goes without a CT scanner in the emergency department. Well, that concept is what the project team is trying to translate into the new hospital that's going to be built. They want to be able to provide a safe environment for the patients, to provide it efficiently in a cost-effective manner. I think if you, and I understand my community's concerns. They don't want something that looks outrageous. They don't want something that looks that imposes it on the environment. But you have to understand, that to deliver quality care nowadays, you have to have a certain built environment and a certain physical plant. And so I would encourage you to allow the project team to build what they need to do to build the best quality hospital in our community. There's another point that I want to make, and I'll try to be brief, is that the quality of care, and this is my strong opinion as a professor, I've been in medicine now for almost 30 years. The quality of care, and I've worked at a lot of different hospitals, and it's my strong opinion that the quality of care is directly related, in a community, is directly related to the quality of the hospital. And that's for several different reasons, because you have, of course, the inpatient services, the outpatient services, educational outreach, research. But I think most importantly, it's because a quality hospital draws quality doctors. Quality doctors are affiliated with good hospitals. We have good doctors in this community. What we want are good doctors in the future. I'll be happy to answer any questions from the commission or from my community.
Yes, thank you.
Good evening. My name is Debbie Saran, and I live at 1190 Mount Vernon in Lake Forest. I'd like to have the commissioners indulge me as I really read aloud into the record the letter that I put in all of your packets. Gentlemen, today I speak to all of you to express my support of the master plan that Northwestern Lake Forest Hospital is proposing. I am a member of the Women's Board of Northwestern Lake Forest Hospital and a member of the Northwestern Lake Forest Hospital Board of Directors. More than that, however, I am a member of this community, a community which is fortunate enough to have a hospital in its midst. I have been a user of the hospital for almost 40 years, beginning as a patient in 1973 when my mother chose Dr. Salter as our family pediatrician, through my years caring for my own children who were also patients of Dr. Salter and his partners at Lake Forest Pediatrics, and currently as my husband and I have chosen Northwestern Lake Forest Hospital as our primary care delivery system. I have seen many changes at Northwestern Lake Forest. As a member of the Women's Board, I have lived through the HMO managed care issues facing all hospitals and clinicians in the 1990s, have seen healthcare try to stabilize in the early 2000s, and have lived with the challenges facing hospitals and physicians as our country tries to make its way through the morass of healthcare reform. I have seen firsthand, through my experience on both boards of NLFH, the issues that face our patients, our doctors, and our administrators as reimbursements get depleted, coverage becomes more refined, and systems become burdened trying to care for those who are underinsured or, in many cases, uninsured. Northwestern Lake Forest Hospital is facing those challenges and many others while trying to conduct business in a building designed for healthcare as it was in the 1940s when it was built. For a time, the building could handle the changes and updates that needed to occur by adding on new structures and making changes to the existing structure to keep operations as up-to-date as possible. However, with the opportunity to partner with one of the preeminent academic medical centers in the nation, if not the world, we also have the opportunity to bring a new hospital to our midst, and that is what I would like to see happen on the property that NLFH has designated for a new hospital campus. As I see it, NLFH, to remain viable, has no option other than to build a new hospital. Current standards and best practices all dictate that modern medicine needs to be conducted effectively in buildings that have all operations close and accessible. Because of the many life safety issues that occur on a daily basis in a hospital, the emergency department, for instance, must be close in proximity to the cardiac catheter lab, and that must be, in turn, close to the surgical suites. This provides an opportunity for continuity of care that cannot happen in a sprawling, low-height building. It is not in the best interest of the patients the hospital serves to treat patients in a low structure, and this design could actually provide harm to the critically ill patient. As a result, a new hospital, out of necessity, needs to be higher rather than low and widespread. This is the best argument for the height that NLFH is requesting. In order to offset the heights of the building, however, Tom McAfee, president of NLFH, and his team of experts have set the building back from the road at a distance of 1,500 feet, minimizing the effect of the height which is required. They have also agreed to setbacks of 250 feet from Waukegan Road and 200 feet from many neighborhoods. Finally, Tom and his team have agreed to maintain 104 acres of open space throughout the campus, actually utilizing, at full build-out, only 65% of the current property. This, to me, signals an enormous effort and sensitivity by Tom, his team at Northwestern Lake Forest, and the leadership of Northwestern Memorial Hospital, who are extremely sensitive to the feel and culture of this community. To address concerns of the neighbors, Tom has held many neighborhood meetings over the last 18 months. His desire was to listen to the neighbors in the community and address their concerns, and address them he has. Tom, at enormous cost, has consolidated parking lots, increased setbacks, made plans for large landscaping berms, and has called for low-level security lighting. He has also developed an effective plan to pull traffic off of Deerpath Road by providing an access to the new hospital from Waukegan. He is also working very closely with IDOT to create access to the hospital campus from Route 41. He and his team envision a green campus with the lead planner, Carol Childs, being a nationally recognized healthcare facility designer who is LEED certified. She will be instrumental in helping choose the architects that ultimately designed this campus and has spent the last year learning about Lake Forest and its culture. I would like to emphasize that the new structure represents a replacement facility, not in addition to the current number of beds. I don't think this has been emphasized enough, and it is an important consideration in that the hospital is not increasing the number of inpatients it is aiming to serve. Therefore, we are not expanding the hospital, we are replacing it, an additional office space for physicians who wish to practice at NLFH. I want to thank all of you for the due diligence you have shown. Kathy, you and your staff have been amazing. I know that I'm putting my personal reputation on the line by standing up here and endorsing this, and if I didn't feel as strongly about the plans that Tom and his team have, I wouldn't be doing it. Thank you all very much for your consideration.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm John Centel. I live at 545 Circle Lane, Lake Forest, and I'm president of Lake Forest Open Lands Association. Thank you again to each of the Plan Commission members for your careful consideration of this critically important development issue for our city. Since the last meeting of the Plan Commission, Open Lands has met with the hospital to propose ideas which we believe could improve upon and expand the vision for the campus and to address the concerns we've raised regarding the current master plan. Our points included provision of meaningful open space in a style that reflects the landscape character of Lake Forest, attention to aesthetics for the surrounding neighborhoods and larger community, including light pollution and building height, a reduction of surface parking to create more open space, provide for better stormwater management and reduced flooding, and more effective utilization of the site's natural infrastructure, enhancement of the natural connectivity of the campus to the surrounding open spaces, and alleviation of traffic concerns. We've also met with the city and shared what we believe are reasonable conditions to expect in a revised master plan, conditions not intended to slow the process down, but rather to help achieve the goal of a top-notch campus and a first-class hospital. We believe both can be achieved. After reviewing the staff report and recommendations distributed by Kathy Cerniak for tonight's meeting, we're pleased that many of our suggestions have been favorably considered and that the report addresses many of the concerns that have been raised about the master plan, both by community members and members of the Commission. We compliment Ms. Cerniak and City Planning staff on providing such thoughtful guidance to the Plan Commission and to the hospital for its proposed work. We believe that the conditions proposed by the City Planning staff are generally appropriate, and we will not take up time to comment on each. But we do have a few additional comments. In terms of height parameters, we encourage the Commission to challenge the hospital's architects to continue to work towards lower height threshold proposal of 60 to 80 feet, including mechanicals, including the exploration of and creative thinking about placement of mechanicals to keep the building height lower. As we've said before, even if a lower building height may necessitate covering more surface area, as the hospital itself proposes as part of its potential future expansion of the new hospital building, then a taller or deeper parking structure may serve to eliminate or mitigate any loss of open space. We've also been advised by construction professionals that often with construction projects of this size, developers are required to erect light poles that can demonstrate the height impact of a structure on distant views. We encourage implementing this method to allow our community to see for itself the potential sightline impact of the proposed buildings. Regarding the staff's comment in the plan recommendation that a unified build-out of this parcel, consistent with the conditions recommended at the end of this report, could create a notable streetscape view at this point, with a defining character, letting people know they are in or passing through Lake Forest, we wish to caution that this comment should not be applied to attain a campus design that will allow Lake Forest streetscapes to be known or dominated by the hospital campus. We suggest instead that we don't want these future structures to define Lake Forest, and that the goal should be to minimize the impact of them on streetscapes and our views from more distant locations within the community. We continue to be concerned that the current plan does not effectively address surface runoff and possible flooding. We've recommended reduced surface parking, yet see no change to the plan. We asked the Plan Commission to require a plan that has a net effective zero change in existing stormwater runoff conditions going to the east from the hospital campus and surrounding neighborhoods and beyond. We've previously stated the importance of a master plan that supports meaningful, connected open space. We welcome the opportunity to work with the hospital to establish defined contiguous open areas on the campus beyond building corridors and beyond street buffers. In addition, we believe the planning process outlined in the staff report will provide a good forum for broad input and for the creation of an improved master plan that our community can embrace. Open Lands is very interested in participating in that planning process. In sum, while there's much work to be done, Open Lands is committed to assisting in this effort, and we're optimistic there's an opportunity to find common ground that can save open space, minimize the environmental and other impacts of this large-scale development on our community, and also allow the hospital to meet the goal of the first-class institution. This is not an either-or choice. Our community and our hospital can achieve both. We think the proposed conditions that the staff report has recommended for approval of the special use permit are worthy of support. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Andrea Cutting. I live at 635 Tiverton Road. Could you put the building height slide back up, the one that had the mixed, this one? So I live at the south part of the campus, and I did send you all a letter for the previous meeting. And I'm wondering why the setbacks are so large on the Waukegan Road and the Lane Lorraine section, that when you come down the south section, they get smaller. And I'm also wondering why the height restriction in the south section is 55 feet, where currently the only structure that's there is the Women's Center, which I understand is about 45 feet. So it's not in keeping with what the current height is in our neighborhood residential area. I recognize that's going to be phase 2, but since you're addressing the setbacks and potential height restrictions at this point, I think they should also be addressed in that southern border of the campus. I too am a lifelong resident of Lake Forest. I've had many family members served by the hospital. I'm in support of the hospital. I just think we need to make some community decisions about what we want this to look like for our children and our grandchildren. And I think the height restrictions, when you look at these staff recommendations, as Kathy pointed out, and as one of you questioned, that these heights clearly are going to be exceeded when they take the mechanicals into consideration. And there is this clause that said every effort shall be made to incorporate the mechanical height within the recommended ranges. However, any single building component may be accepted, and that would not require an additional amendment. So you are giving them a blank check to exceed these height recommendations if they so need to be exceeded from their standpoint. You also had a letter from an esteemed worldwide renowned architect who's here this evening, who did make some recommendations about the hospital seeking some more architectural input into how this structure could be built less high, but still provide the quality of care that they need to do. And I think at the end of the day, it's about money. And we don't want to be pressed into the time schedule that the hospital needs to address their business concerns before the community's concerns are addressed. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Melissa Knorr. I live at 910 Lane Lorraine. I've had a difficult week with family and health, and I completely understand the importance of a hospital. We're friends of hospital. I don't have a problem with anyone at the hospital, and I support doctors. And I don't think the question is whether or not hospitals save lives. We know that that happens. But I think in a community like this, it's important that the hospital show respectful development, respectful of the fact that they are bordered on 3 sides by neighbors, and they are residential neighbors. And that's my baby. I've heard them talk about this is their baby, and my home is mine. And since I received a letter in September, I go to work, I work hard every day, and I come home, and my entire drive is not looking forward to coming home to the reminder that I'm having to protect the thing that we've worked for, one of our largest investments. So we're worried about the height. We appreciate efforts that have been made in order to improve the buffer between Lane Lorraine and the hospital. We would like to see that buffer further increased to be consistent with at least Waukegan Road, given that the building is closer to our properties. And we'd like to make sure that the current vegetation remain in place and that any landscaping be done in addition to the existing vegetation that's in place. I'd like to call your attention to a couple things that I noticed while I was here today. First, point 10 on the recommended conditions. You know, it says the building height zone graphic in the master plan shall be interpreted as establishing approved height zones, etc. But then in italics, we use the language of recommended heights is used again. So to me, that comes across not as firm heights, but recommended heights. And I believe I heard Mr. McAfee indicate that these are suggested heights. Even in the zone where 35 feet is the maximum allowable height, we've marked it as 45 feet. Also, I believe that the Illinois building codes require the mechanicals on the top to be part of the total height, not something that gets added to the top. On the same document, on point 23, future changes, I think this is the thing that concerns the neighbors most, and that's where we read, any proposed change to or expansion of the hospital campus boundaries shall be authorized through a special use public review. That's what we're here for today. They have requested a special use. And in order to receive that special use, they need to have established that they have met certain conditions. My husband and I laid that for you in the response that we gave you in March. It's our belief that not all those conditions have yet been met for you to approve the special use permits they're seeking. But number 23 says to me that our neighbors will continue to go through this process of having to come back and defend our property because the boundaries, as established as setbacks, carry no legal reinforcement, and we need to know that setbacks are permanent no-build zones. Whether they're conservation easements or some other vehicle that's available that Ms. Cerniak brought up earlier, we want to know that they are permanent no-build zones legally. On page 27 of today, the May 12th master plan, I'm seeing a second tiered structure, kind of off of what I call parcel 4. That's new for us. We're really worried about these tiered structures. We're worried that they're going to be designed as open structures and we're going to see all those lights. We'd like to know that they're going to be closed structures and there's consideration of the lights that'll be on the top of those that will be peering into neighboring homes. We would like to say again that if you approve this, the neighbors coming off of Burton and Lane Lorraine do not want a bike path. We are very concerned about security spillover or safety issues spilling over into our neighborhood, and as much as possible we want to create a barrier so that people cannot come into our neighborhood. So I thank you for your time today and for listening to me for probably 4 of the 5 meetings. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Steve Ganchert. I live in Lake Bluff on Witchwood Lane. Also a lifelong Lake Forest resident. Grew up in Whispering Oaks on Beverly, then lived on Ashlawn Drive, and now live in Lake Bluff. So I've lived through all the changes to our community, the traffic issues. But I did want to address a few things that came up tonight. I had a prepared statement, but you have it in your packets, and it's not going to add anything that anybody else hasn't said already. But a few of the things that came up tonight, one of the questions was about security. We do have a security staff at the hospital. We don't anticipate that the people coming to the new facility are going to be any different than those come already. It's already
primarily people not from Lake Forest. We do draw from the Lake Forest, Lake Bluff community, but the majority of our patients are from the surrounding communities. I don't know if anybody's been out to the Grays Lake facility. It's beautiful. They've taken care to take care of the environment, which was a wetland area. They preserved all that. It's a beautiful building. None of us knows what this building is going to look like when it's done. This hasn't even gone to the architects. They're talking about having 3 of the top architects in the world design this building. I know everybody's concerned about the height and the traffic, but as everybody else has said tonight, the main issue is about patient care. I don't live next to the hospital, but I do work at other hospitals that are right next to communities that, in my opinion, are not very appealing. I would say, based on what I've seen at Grays Lake, what I've seen downtown, this will be a spectacular facility that anybody will be proud to see from where they live, with all the landscaping and everything else. If anybody has any questions, I am the former chief of surgery, so perhaps you may have some questions about the hospital as well. I know the issue came up about residents and students. There are no plans to bring up residents or students on a regular basis from Northwestern at this time, and we don't foresee that happening for the next 5 to 10 years. At some point, yes, there will be a role for residents at our hospital, our community hospital, which will be outstanding for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Adrian Smith, and I live at 1100 West Summerfield on Waukegan Road, directly across from the hospital site. I have 5 or 6 points I'd like to just mention to you. The first one is that we've had several meetings with the hospital, and they were very friendly and accommodating, but so far I don't think that any of the recommendations that any of the neighbors have taken, have asked them to do or look at, have seriously been addressed in the master plan presented today. The height issue is about the same as it's always been. When you consider the potential for 20 feet of additional mechanical space on the top of these buildings, you're talking about not about 45 feet, but 65 feet in the 40 acres directly across the street from us, which currently is zoned by restrictive covenant to 35 feet. So you're doubling the height of that. The central tower would go to effectively 100 feet. The comments have been mentioned that you're not adding rooms to this, you're replacing rooms, but what you are adding is enough office space to require another 1,000 cars. That's what's causing your traffic problem. It's not the hospital, it's the additional cars that would be used for the office space that takes over the current hospital. Try to get rid of that, you've solved your traffic problem. District cooling for the entire campus would eliminate the need for any mechanical on any of these roof areas. And it's a highly sustainable opportunity to do this, and ultimately cheaper for the campus, less energy expended on that system. The other thing that I wanted to mention is that in the diagram there, the lighter shade of green near the campus is encroaching in the 40 acres by just a little bit. So that means that that 35-foot height limit on the restrictive covenant would be modified to accommodate the 80-foot plus 20-foot or 100 feet instead of 35 feet. So you're tripling the height there. I would love to see why that can't be pushed to the east by that dimension, so you don't have to change the covenants. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Tom Swarthout. I live at 987 Maplewood Road in Lake Forest. I'm privileged to speak behind Adrian Smith. I've been a great admirer of Mr. Smith for many years. In fact, I can see some of his buildings from my backyard in Lake Forest. So I find it interesting that Mr. Smith would have issues with height. I was very involved in the Women's Center construction. I was a member of the Building and Grounds Committee at Lake Forest Hospital, served as chairman for a short time. There is no cooling tower on that building at all. That cooling tower is below grade by about 20 feet. We created a big window well. Very proud of the fact that that building, in fact, has slate that came from the original quarry that the original building came from. So we're very sensitive towards the adjacent neighbors. I encouraged the neighbors as well as this commission to go and take a look at the hospital and the sensitivity we've always maintained to the adjacent neighbors, especially to the recent addition at the Women's Center. I am a neighbor of Lake Forest College, and over the last 10 years they've increased the enrollment by 50%. They just recently approved a 4-story dormitory. It's about 300 feet long. All of the neighbors are certainly concerned about the increased enrollment at Lake Forest College, but I think it was a unanimous support for the college's efforts to increase its facilities. That's a great institution. We support it. There's 2 5-story buildings currently on the campus. I'm just interested to see this building. I'm about a block away from that building. Doesn't seem to impact my property values. It certainly doesn't seem to impact anybody else's property values in the neighborhood. I want to let everybody know I think it's important to support these great institutions in Lake Forest. I think you've heard plenty of testimony as it relates to the importance of life safety, and that's why the hospital is really pushing for the 81 feet, the 5 stories. It's critical that that gets approved. Other than that, thank you for your service. Thank you for the 2 commissioners that are resigning tonight. I think they've done an incredible job for the community, and I think we take their service for granted, so thank you.
Thank you. That concludes. It does not conclude. Shoot.
Try to do 2.5 minutes.
There you go.
My name's Tony Kessman, and I live at 1200 Longmeadow Lane. I moved here in 1985 and built a home. Remember going through the process with the city. And then in 1995, I was impressed with the collaboration between the city, Open Lands, and a developer out here at Meldie Farm. And my wife and I bought a lot there. We love that setting. I reflect on the collaboration at that time to create the environment that's there. We built our home in 2003. I've been in the hospital supply business and medical device business for 35 years. I think I've been in between 1/3 and 1/2 of the hospitals in our country. In my opinion, the case for the replacement of this hospital is obvious. And it appears to me that there is consensus around that. I'm not going to elaborate on that because the points have been made. I serve as a trustee of the hospital. I'm chairman of the Professional Standards Committee, which is probably the most important subcommittee of the board, and that we're responsible for the safety of our patients and the will to create positive outcomes. I was a trustee before the merger with Northwestern, and I credit Northwestern with making sure that we populated our board with a number of members from our community, and we've done that. And I can assure you that a number of those members, many whose families have lived here longer than 1985, as well as myself, had made it clear from the onset the importance of collaboration with the community as we prepared for and began the planning process for the new hospital. And I just make 3 points. I want to express my personal commitment that as we go through the careful selection of a world-class architectural firm to help us with this planning process, that we will make sure that the community involvement and input continues. And I respect, Mr. Chairman, your admonition earlier to Mr. McAfee about open lands, et cetera. I want to make my own commitment that that type of communication, that type of collaboration will continue. I've also served as a trustee of Children's Memorial Hospital for a decade. Proudly, we'll open our new facility there on June the 9th of this year. I can tell you that, as you all know, as you may know, that hospital that we're replacing also, if I may use the word, was obsolete from a technological parity standpoint, our ability to move patients efficiently and logically. One point that's not been made tonight is that we were hampered in our physician recruitment at Children's, which is a world-class pediatric medical center, because of our archaic facilities. And just the announcement several years ago of building our new hospital enhanced our ability to recruit world-class physicians to children. I think there'll be great benefit from this as well. I would tell you from my experience across the country and in the hospital business that Northwestern medicine has a world-class reputation that parallels the Mayo Clinics, the Cleveland Clinics, the Sloan Ketterings. And it's my own considered opinion that the ability to have a state-of-the-art hospital supported by Northwestern medicine in our community is a gift. It's just simply a gift. And I would encourage all of you to unanimously support this. It's been very clear all the remaining caveats and contingencies that we must get through before we ever put a spade in the ground. But time's of the essence here. It's hard to please all the people all the time, and I'm deeply sensitive to all of the points made tonight on both sides of the equation. A lot more to do from a clarity standpoint in order to get this done. But again, I urge you to, in the interest of this community we love, the next 100 years of healthcare in our community, to unanimously support this so that we can move ahead. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes public testimony. Before we, let me see, what do we have yet to do? We've got staff response to public testimony, final questions from commission to petitioner or staff. But I'd like to take just a quick 5-minute break before we move on to you, Kathy, okay? And we'll keep it at 5 minutes. Thank you. Okay, we'd like to move forward. Staff response to public testimony.
I do have several suggestions for clarifications to the conditions, both in response to your comments and in response to some of the public comment. So I'd like to take a moment and go through that. Could we put up the height zone diagram? It was pointed out that in the paragraph, and I'm speaking about condition number 10, in the paragraph under that condition, there still are some references to recommended height, and the recommended should be changed to approved. The height zones shown are intended to be maximums. And in the 45-foot height zone, the 55-foot height zone, and the 60-foot height zones, those are intended to be absolute maximums. In every case, and we can add clarifying language to this, in every case, the mechanicals in those zones must be under the approved height. The language that allows flexibility for mechanicals to rise above the height limit is only applicable to that 81-foot vertical element overlay zone. But even with that, we heard from the Plan Commission clearly, and I think you heard a commitment from the hospital, that all alternatives should be explored and every effort should be made to keep the mechanicals down. Commissioner Culbertson, in response to your concern, certainly you could put a limit, even though you have the language that says every effort shall be made to keep the mechanicals below 81, you could add language that says, and in no event shall the mechanicals in that 81-foot height overlay zone rise above 96 feet. So those clarifications we could make in the language.
Kathy, could I?
Sure.
I don't know, you don't mind if I interrupt you doing your I believed, or I believe, that the central campus building height maximum is 81 feet, including mechanicals. However, there is a caveat. If after exhaustive work and design, which is going to take place over 18 to 24 months, a year and a half to 2 years, and they came back and say, we absolutely, totally cannot do that without jeopardizing the quality of patient care or for many other important reasons, we must have something in addition to 81 feet because we can't find a proper place for the mechanicals. Then that will come back before the Plan Commission as part of the verification process. That's how I interpret the language. Is that correct?
Yes.
Fine. Okay.
There were some comments about the parking structures and concern about light impacts. Condition number 12 speaks directly to parking structures and talks about mitigating the appearance of cars and preventing the spillover of light impacts. And there are a number of ways that can be done, and that would be something that would be also identified over that 18 to 24-month period. There was a concern about bike lane or pedestrian connections through the Burton Drive area. The recommendation in the staff report is that you recommend that the City Council initiate vacation of Burton Drive. That would mean essentially that the city divides that existing right-of-way in half and vacates half of the right-of-way to the property owner on the north and half to the property owner on the site, on the south, and it would no longer be a public right-of-way either for vehicular access, bicycle, or pedestrian. in response to Commissioner Shaw's earlier concern about condition 20. If I understood your concern correctly, there was confusion in this condition with respect to an IDOT project. That could be clarified by, in the second sentence, in that condition, simply adding the word local. The second sentence reads, in addition, the hospital shall be responsible for its proportionate share of local costs related to any new public infrastructure. So that recognizes that that particular project would be an IDOT project. There was a question, Chairman Reisenberg, I think you raised the question about the 45-foot allowance in the area west of the overlay district. Staff actually encouraged that area to be within an allowed 45-foot height area. That really allows us to work through the design development process and try to address and have the flexibility to address the request we heard to really try and limit surface parking on this campus. It also could allow us the opportunity to do something creative, to look at a green roof perhaps on the parking structure. So I would urge you to allow that to remain at 45 feet, just simply to give us the flexibility to achieve the best possible design. There was a question about security, and I would offer the following condition for your consideration. Consideration shall be given to security on the campus and in the surrounding neighborhoods, both from a design perspective and from an operational perspective. I don't know if that addresses your concern. I think those were my changes to the condition. I would again just state that I do believe this plan has evolved significantly from when it was first presented. I believe it's a strong plan. I believe that this process has really, really worked very well. I think that it was mentioned that the City of Lake Forest does go through laborious processes, and they really are collaborative. And I think this is just the first step, and you have a very strong foundation from which to move forward on this project. Thank you.
Thank you. The next agenda, petitioner rebuttal.
Mr. Chairman, truthfully, there's not much I can add. I think that that throughout this process, you've heard from patients whose lives were saved to our physicians who need accommodations to be able to apply their trade and their gift, and from trustees that are part of our community, and the neighbors. And I think that you've seen how we've responded, and I could tell you that that I personally am absolutely committed to delivering the best hospital to our community to meet our needs. And I think that that with close collaboration with all of the parties, the plan that's in front of you today is one that will allow us to achieve that. With respect to the building height and the other recommendations that were advanced tonight, I certainly feel that we can do it. In fact, with some of the peer review work that we did have advanced that is in the packet, we know that the building height that we're asking for at 81 feet is something that we know through very thoughtful effort is not asking for more than we need. I have no reason to do that. In fact, the opposite's true. I think that we're doing everything we can, and we will continue to do that, and we will continue to engage the community. But at the end of the day, we think it's absolutely critical that we could build the best and safest hospital. In fact, my board won't let me do anything other than that, and of course, I wouldn't advance anything then. So with that, I would respectfully ask for you to advance this plan. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Thank you. Final questions from commissioners to petitioner or staff? Beginning with Mr. Carris, sure.
I have one question, Mr. McAfee. It's with regard to the setbacks around the blue area, particularly to the neighborhood to the west of the education and research area, as well as west of the health and wellness. Were those why were those designed for less of a buffer than the other areas?
Well, I think 2 points. We have significantly increased yeah, is it, I don't know if you can see
Yeah,
it.
the 250 and 200, I understand. It's the
Right.
one further south adjacent.
This one.
Correct.
Yeah, we've actually doubled the setback. Now, I think that right. So we've doubled it. I think it's important to remember that the geometry of the campus is such that, you know, the width of that portion of the campus is very tight. So, you know, that we think that it's again, when you step back and look at the setbacks, the commitments of doubling from 14 to 28, is it 28 acres, to having a 65 or over 104 acres of open space on this campus, that we've completely demonstrated that we're interested in maintaining an open campus feel. Having said that, you know, the campus is there to provide health care. We want to make sure that it's positioned to do that.
Thank you.
I could just add to clarify, the setbacks on those areas also were based on existing development. And although they gave a little bit more room, we were realistic that there was no proposal to, as part of this plan, demolish all of that.
Right, at least to the south portion of the property and the furthest north where the health, or the workout facility is, right? Okay, thanks.
That's it. Commissioner Shaw, questions?
I don't have any questions, other than what I've already asked.
Okay, thanks. Commissioner Newman?
The only question I have is why the zone, maximum height zone to the north and to the west is 45 feet, while the one to the south is 55 feet. We probably covered this, but I'd like to review it because I suspect part of it is in respect to the existing structure.
Correct.
But the south part of that campus gets a little snug down there, and I wanted to ask if you could consider including 45 feet as a limit on the south end as well. There's more proximity to residential neighborhoods on the south end. To the north end, I think even moving that to 55 feet on the north end because of the proximity to Lake Forest Place, which already has an existing taller structure, might be an interesting compromise.
Yeah, I think that the Lake Forest, the Women's Center today is in the 53, 55 foot range today. So that's what we have on that portion of the campus. And again, looking at that facility, taking into consideration the neighbors' views, you cannot see that facility. It is well insulated. And again, because of the tight geometry, we really feel that we want to have the flexibility. We've made the commitment to the south end of the campus that at no point will we increase the density beyond what's there today. So arguably, you know, having that kind of flexibility, not knowing how we might want to evolve that campus, gives us the ability to also maintain that open space that we think is so important for the campus.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Commissioner Cuthbert?
No questions.
Commissioner Anderson?
I had one question for Kathy. There was a reference to permanent no-build zones that are associated with these barrier areas or separation areas. What is that? I mean, how does that, is that possible in this context? Or, I mean, so, because the question is, what is the permanence of these decisions we're making about those separation areas?
I don't remember which number condition, but there is a condition that speaks to that, and that is part of the design development process that we will need to work with the hospital to identify are those buffer areas, are there those no-build areas, are those outlots, is there a covenant placed on them, is there a conservation easement? So that is something that we will work through and bring back as part of the verification process to determine how exactly those will be designated and assured as no-build zones.
So that can yet be done, completed, or whatever, based on how this evolves from here?
Yes,
Okay.
and that too is
I mean, we don't have to
consistent.
specify it at this point, in other words, or something.
Correct. That too is consistent with the tentative and final processing of a subdivision, where in the final stage, we would bring you those details.
I did have one question.
Sure.
Thank you. Kathy, is there any process for amending the master plan if necessary?
There's always a process for amending the master plan. The city could not grant any type of entitlements that says you can never apply for any change. Any amendment to the master plan would need to come back and go through a public hearing process before the Plan Commission, and the City Council would need to adopt a new ordinance accepting those amendments. But there's no way that the city can tell someone you can never ask for anything different. You know, we certainly saw with Barra Campus. Barra just simply disappeared, and the city could not say that always has to be Barra Campus.
How about in the other direction? How about if staff sees something that is flawed with the master plan, and can they petition to some government body to amend the plan?
The special use permit and the conditions could be revoked by the city council if the conditions were violated. The city just couldn't change its mind, but the special use permit establishes a process, a very deliberate process for verification of detailed plans with the master plan. So through that process, there are those controls.
One more question for the petitioner. At some juncture, I think you indicated that you would be pursuing a LEED silver type of construction.
Correct.
Is that on the hospital, the medical building, the parking structures? Where does it
That is
begin?
the standard that we would want to apply to, to the entire project, for new components. I think that's one of our guiding principles is to pursue that.
Kathy, is that something that gets considered at this level, or is it more appropriate as we get further into the construction process?
Again, I can't quote the number of the condition, but there is a condition that speaks to really looking toward a sustainable model for the entirety of the campus. It would not be appropriate, since LEED certification itself has a cost associated with it. I think more important to the city is that we really get a project that incorporates as many sustainable features as possible. Whether it receives a designation or not is another matter.
Thank you very much. Oh, I'm sorry.
No.
Okay.
I don't have any questions. So let's go immediately to commission discussion and comment, beginning with Commissioner Newman.
This is obviously a very large, important project for the community to undertake. I'm very impressed, I must say, with the degree to which the hospital has responded to 5 meetings worth of pushback with additional berming, setbacks, no builds, screenings, buffering. I would like to be a landscape architect, provider, and firm in this town moving forward with the hospital on the horizon. But I can't imagine a community like this without a hospital. I couldn't imagine a community like this without schools, police and fire, all the basic institutions of which a hospital is one. And Lake Forest Hospital has been part of this community dating back to the Dick family's donation of the land upon which it is built. So if you're going to have a hospital in your community, I think people who live there want best of class services delivered to them. And I think exogenously the healthcare system in this country dictates a certain scale by which those services are delivered. And so I think 5 weeks of wanting to keep things general in regards to a master plan, but we immediately get granular and we stay granular, trying to get back up to 35,000 feet, I think it's time to move ahead with this plan.
Okay.
Thank you.
Commissioner Cuthbert.
Culbertson.
I'm sorry. It is 10 after 9.
It is.
It's way past my bedtime.
Absolutely.
Should we talk about the Alzheimer's?
Yeah, with the Alzheimer's. I'll be spending some time with you, Mr. McAfee, very soon.
I agree with Commissioner Newman's observation that the hospital petition has shown its flexibility and its ability to listen to what the community has said and what the commission has said. And there have been significant and material changes made from the original plan. And even the fellow from Open Lands had to concede that an awful lot of the issues had been addressed. And I think they have. I would submit that we should incorporate a couple of things Kathy brought up. One, I liked her wording on the security measure recommendation that might be incorporated into the master plan. And also, I think there should be a maximum height stated somehow with respect to the 81-foot zone. We just can't leave that open-ended, I don't think. Whether it's 96 or 81, including the mechanicals, 96, including the mechanicals, I think is still open for discussion, but I think there has to be a maximum height established there. Otherwise, I approve of the staff recommendations in toto, and will recommend that we approve the special use permit and recommend it to the City Council.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner Culbertson. Commissioner Anderson.
I actually think that this has been a very good and thorough process, and I thank the hospital for where you've come to this point, and I actually thank staff for doing a very, very good job of developing recommendations, analysis, and conditions that I think were very carefully crafted, and spent a lot of time over the last few days looking at this, and it really has come a long way. And I know that folks would still like to have a chance to talk further about this, but I do think there's been tremendous opportunity and a thoughtful, careful listening going on a number of fronts, so I don't want to dismiss that at all. I would like to see, I actually support this strongly, but I also would like to find a way to capture a couple of your words, Jack, that you brought into the description around the 81 feet limit. And I think it was in the context of you're going to do everything you can under the power of God or something like that to do what you can to be within that limit. I don't exactly know what you said, but it was actually very strong language that would say the hospital is going to do everything it can to achieve that. I don't think, I would prefer to do that than to say, we're going to go with 96 feet as an alternative maximum. I think the emphasis that you put on it, maybe we can try to find a way to craft that as part of the conditional language. But given all that I've seen in terms of where we've come to at this point in the fifth meeting, I strongly support this.
I don't normally like to interject at this point in the discussion, but I want to make a suggestion. Turn to page 7.
Okay.
And I think the language says what I said, but the fact is, I don't think it's very clear. To make it clear, I would suggest that under the second central campus, where it says approved stepped up, or stepped back upper floors overlay height, not the main building mass, ranges from 60 to 81 feet, comma, including mechanicals. I think that gives all the clarity that's needed. The language then down below supports that, but also says that there is a process that after exhaustive design work and architectural work, if Mr. McAfee comes back after doing all of this and says, you know, we tried, it can't be done. You know, we would totally screw up the process.
He would be able to demonstrate that too.
And he would be able to demonstrate that. I'm just going to assume that he could do that. If there is a process, this comes back before, and he said, you know, it's got to be 95 feet, including mechanicals, or it's got to be 92.5 feet mechanicals. Then it comes back for us for a deliberation. And quite frankly, if I'm on the plan commission, I'm going to approve it.
Okay.
I'm going to approve it. I'm not going to stand in your way of building a world-class hospital. But I do want to challenge you. I mean, there's considerable, we owe it to the residents. We owe it to the stakeholders as a commission, I believe, to challenge you in that regard, just to see if you can't do it. And because I know it would be much appreciated. But I should have given the commentary.
But I think that's the kind of strength that
Okay.
or maybe
But
clarification that we need.
I think that just putting the comma, including mechanicals there, gives us what we need.
Okay. Kathy agrees. Okay, that's the extent of my comments.
Okay, I'm going to move then to.
That's including mechanicals then on all of the zones, right?
The other zones are different.
The other zones include mechanicals.
Exactly,
They're
so,
absolute.
but it doesn't, does it say that?
Kathy include that too.
We can make that modification,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
yes, the other zones include
Fine.
mechanicals, the allowances for the
You're
81
right,
feet.
you're right. It didn't say it before, and it doesn't say it now, but it will now. Okay. Commissioner Carris.
Thank you. I too would like to commend the hospital for all the work that's been done, but also the community, the area residents, as well as the open lands representatives as well. A lot of work has been done. As we pointed out at the last meeting, I think we were at a count of 25 or 26 meetings when we met last time, and I know there have been numerous meetings since then to further revise and refine this process. I will say, though, that I think I do support going forward under the recommendations and the conditions placed by the staff, but I do think we are at the beginning of the process. We're not at the end of the process. I think it's incumbent upon us to have the right members and the right elements of the team, the review committee in place, representing residents, representing experts in the field, as well as representing the medical profession. And we can get to the point where we have a safe, expedient, urgent care facility that protects all of us as residents and also is a positive effect on the environment and the visual integrity of Lake Forest for years to come. That being said, I will support this and look forward to the process and going forward.
Thank you. Commissioner Shaw.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At the last meeting, I described this process and project as peeling back layers of an onion. As we uncover more layers, we find more layers of concerns and questions. Therefore, I want to begin my comments tonight by strongly commending Kathy and the staff for their hard work in developing an extensive number of conditions of approval since our last meeting. I believe that we've come a long way with some of these extra conditions of approval that will help alleviate some of the concerns that members of the community have posed at our previous meetings. I also want to commend the members of the public that have been at the different meetings who have presented their concerns. As I said before, we listen to your concerns. We live here too, and the concerns you bring up may not be something that initially occurs to us when we read through the packets before our meetings. When you bring things up, it causes us to think deeper. I also want to commend the members of the public that presented heartfelt testimonials about what Lake Forest Hospital has done in providing quality care for themselves and or their families in the past. And presumably Lake Forest will continue to provide quality care for these same people, their families, and future patients, regardless of whether we approve of the master plan tonight or we approve of it a few months down the road after we've tightened up some of the language. I think that some of my concerns that I raised in my questioning to Kathy earlier tonight still remain to be unanswered, at least from my point of view. Maybe I'm just not quick to catch on to her answers, but some of the concerns I have, and I wish that there could be a way before approval to have these answered in the conditions. For example, who pays for the road work to Waukegan, to Westmoreland, and to Deerpath, and for that matter to the Deerpath 41 interchange? The conditions of approval suggest the Lake Forest Hospital will pay their proportionate share. However, in response to my questions to Kathy tonight, I believe I heard that Lake Forest Hospital will pay for all road work to Waukegan, to Westmoreland, and Deerpath, not their proportionate share, even though that's not what the condition says. As for Deerpath and 41, I heard just recently that that's going to be excluded from the conditions because we're going to define the road work to be only local work, and that this is really an IDOT problem many years down the road. That troubles me a lot because I think that one of the advantages of this project I'm hearing is that it will put pressure on IDOT to do something about the 41 and Deerpath interchange, but putting pressure on them and having some concrete recommendations or solutions or plans for payment if IDOT doesn't come through the way we think they should, I think is kind of important, and I think that's been kind of put by the wayside. We've sit and spent a lot of time talking about the height of buildings or height of a building, and I understand that if I live next door to this complex, I probably would be concerned about a 100-foot building also. But as a resident of Lake Forest, I'm more concerned about the traffic problems that are going to be created by this project, and in particular at Deerpath and 41. And suggesting that it's an IDOT problem that we can potentially put pressure on to solve the problem down the road causes me great concern, especially when there's not going to be any requirement that Lake Forest Hospital pay for any of the improvements to that interchange. In addition, what kind of obligations will Lake Forest Hospital have to maintaining the improved roads at Westmoreland, Deerpath, and at Waukegan Road? While they will, quote, pay their proportionate share according to the conditions of approval, and or they will pay for all of those improvements depending on what is actually the ultimate conclusion in tonight's meeting. I don't know who's going to pay for it over the time of a 10 to 20 to 25 to 50% increase in traffic when it has to be maintained. It's one thing to widen a street today when there's no increased traffic. It's another thing to improve a street that needs to be widened further when there's a 50% increased traffic 10 years down the road. What happens if IDOT decides not to approve anything at 41 and Deerpath, or decides not to pay for it? Does that mean that Lake Forest can still do the work? And if so, who pays for that? What authority will this advisory committee have really in giving advice to the staff if it truly is only an advisory committee? It seems more like eyewash to me than it does a solution. What standards or parameters will future plan commissioners use to determine if each step in the development is consistent with this master plan, especially if this master plan is more akin to a concept, as the chairman asked the question, rather than a specific roadmap? Why can't we have more detail for phase 3 other than just an expansion of the central campus, especially if future plan commissioners will have to decide if this ambiguous phrase is consistent with the master plan? What real control will future plan commissioners have over city-mandated affordable housing requirements on the campus when we don't have any real specifics on future residential living expansions on the campus? The requirement that every effort will be made to keep the height maximum to 81 or 96 or 150 feet, whatever the case may be, is really no requirement at all. As an attorney and a courtroom attorney, every reasonable effort is a meaningless phrase. Okay, it's in the eye of the beholder. In summary, I want a world-class hospital in my community. I'm not just a lawyer, I'm also a pharmacist. I've spent my lifetime in healthcare too. So this is not somebody that has no experience with healthcare sitting up here. And I want to approve this project and I want to move forward. But if only I can see some tightening of the language that will address some of these concerns I've raised tonight. And if not, then I guess I'll have to vote no. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm not going to pontificate, but I
did
can't.
enough for you.
You took care of that. Thank you. I cannot conceive about not moving forward with this project. This is you either move forward with this thing, or the hospital goes away. I mean, we have to invest behind this hospital. I won't call it a Rube Goldberg, but it's probably close. And if we don't make it better, it will continue to deteriorate to the point that it will go away. So to me, there is no option other than to move forward. But this is a 20-year plan, and it's 3 phases. The first phase is 5 years from now. 5 years from now, none of these people are going to be here. This plan, our terms will have expired. So there needs to be a process on how we move forward on an ongoing basis. So this technical and design advisory committee, I totally embrace. It is a little ambiguous, but there will be a thread of consistency that will work with staff who in turn will work with our successors to make sure that this moves forward correctly on an ongoing basis. There is nobody smart enough up here to put together a 20-year plan, including all the contingencies. So much can change during this time frame. This has to be an ongoing process, additive process, to make this thing work. There will be changes that are going to occur, and then it will come back before this committee, and we will continue to move the process forward, so that at the end of 5 years from now, we will have a world-class facility, and then we'll be able to take a look at phase 2, and we be able to look at phase 3. If who knows, there may not even be a phase 3. So, I personally feel, as the chairman, I've taken this thing as far as I can take it. I'm ready to turn it over to the city council. I'm ready to give the hospital approval to move ahead, and that really is what this master plan is, concept plan, master plan. It's the authority for them to move forward, to spend your money, to put together the design plans, to put together the landscaping and the buffering, to redesign all of the issues supporting the traffic plan. If we would have additional meetings, we're at the point of I believe we're at the point of diminishing returns. Every meeting, maybe we start off with 50 things and we got rid of 15 and raised 2, and the next time we got rid of another 15. We're down to the point now that we could meet till the end of the year, I think, and accomplish very, very, very little. It's time to move this on the city council with some of the changes that we've just agreed to. And then it's time to start the process so that we can move this thing forward and it continues to come back to us. So I did pontificate. I couldn't help myself.
Can I add just one thing? There's going to be multiple opportunities for the community to stay engaged in this process.
Absolutely.
And there's multiple levels of control by the city, the Building Review Board, the Plan Commission, City Council, to shepherd this thing along through the many years that it'll take. So this is not by any means, I agree with Commissioner Carris, this is really just the beginning.
Not the end.
But I agree with you, Mr. Chairman, that I don't know how much more we can do here.
Okay. Other than entertain a motion.
Well, no, I'd like to discuss just a couple of things if we may.
You
Oh.
were so close.
Well, I thought I had it. Yeah, okay, sure. We'll do whatever you want.
Well, I kind of want to see if
I thought I'm not gonna get into your way, but I thought the commission discussion and comment was gonna cover that, but go ahead.
I think aren't we still in the discussion phase? Does this not mean we can't discuss things amongst ourselves?
I guess we can.
Okay. To Mr. Shaw's points, I'm wondering, Kathy, is there, or fellow commissioners, is there some way we can just tighten up the language just a little bit right now? As I understood the staff recommendation, the hospital was going to pay for all improvements to roads on the campus and intersections to roads leading off the campus, which does not include Deerpath and 41. Deerpath and 41 would be a separate consideration with respect to IDOT. However, I also understood that it would be possible to assess impact fees potentially to contribute to funding of a 41, a possible future renovation of the 41 Deerpath Exchange. Is that a fair characterization, Kathy?
I would, my notes align with what you just said. Condition number 20 could be clarified to state that all roadway improvements associated with Phase 1 will be fully funded by the hospital. That's been clear, and I agree that condition didn't clearly state that, but we can clarify that condition. It's impossible for us to sit here today and talk about Route 41 and Deerpath intersection and how that's going to be funded or when that's going to happen. So I think that instead needs to be maybe addressed simply by adding the word local to that second sentence. But I think with that change, that condition covers at least the concern, any question that the Phase 1 roadway improvements have always been expected to be paid for fully by the hospital.
And then does recommendation 22 suggest at least that last sentence there, does that at least open the door for assessing an impact fee with respect to a potential redevelopment of the 41 Deerpath Exchange if the city had to participate in the funding of such a project?
22 is really a catch-all. If there was some significant project and the city felt that the hospital contributed to the need for that project, I have no doubt that the city council would approach the hospital.
So, as you say, it's a catch-all. So. Mr. Shaw, does that address that specific issue with respect to your concerns?
Well, the fact that she says that they're going to pay for all associated with Phase 1 is not consistent with what the document says right now.
Right, she's proposing an amendment to that.
Well, I only heard her proposing the word local as an amendment.
There was a prior.
I also suggested that we add language that clarifies that all Phase 1 roadway improvements will be fully funded by the hospital.
So then when Phase 2 and Phase 3 come before us, is that an opportunity for the Plan Commission to add in road improvements on the backs of Lake Forest Hospital then too, or do we need to address that now?
Phase 2 and the future phase, as we've said all along, they're less detailed. What we do know is that there's a condition proposed that would require a traffic study prior to the build-out of Phase 2, and then again prior to the build-out of the future phase. At that time, if there was a determination that something else was needed, that's when that would be addressed.
And when you say that's when that would be addressed, what would be addressed? Who was paying for it?
Correct.
And the Plan Commission at that time could say, we want them to pay for it?
The Plan Commission, ultimately the City Council.
But I mean, that's something that can be added to future development conditions.
Yes, just like the Phase 1 road improvements are being paid for by the hospital, if something was needed in Phase 2, that could be a similar discussion.
And why is it we can't include some contribution by Lake Forest Hospital to the 41 Deerpath issue?
number one, identifying assessments or fees is not the role of the Plan Commission, it's the role of the City Council. And number two, the Deerpath and Route 41 intersection project is a community-wide project. In fact, it's a regional project. And we can't begin tonight to sit here and think about how IDOT might approach that. But I'm confident if there was a requirement for community participation, the City Council would discuss that, not only with the hospital, but with many other community partners. And that's really not, that's a much bigger issue than this master plan. I think the community can benefit by using the hospital expansion, rehabilitation as leverage to move that project, which is in the community's best interest, forward.
I like the changes that Kathy's just
I like the changes that
articulated.
she suggested too.
Okay.
I still wish that we could do something about
41.
41,
right.
especially since there's also possibly going to be a 41 cutover to the hospital campus south of Gage Lane and north of Deerpath. It's been talked about in the last 5 meetings. So who's going to pay for that?
It's a different animal.
Is it?
I believe it's a different animal.
Okay.
Yeah,
It's a
I
different
do.
animal.
I mean, I do. I mean, that's, yeah, I mean, that is clearly of a benefit or clearly a condition of this hospital expansion. The other has been a problem since Hector was a pup. And, I mean, the hospital is gonna fund the study. I think that's the most we can expect of them. And then, depending upon what the outcome of the study is, then it has to be, that's a city council issue. And I think it's somewhat covered in condition number 22, that it will be, it will be determined down the road. But I don't think we need to wring our hands over that at this point. I still would like to entertain a motion.
I will move it, move the request for, the approval of the request for a special use permit and adopting the master plan with the conditions that we've talked about. So I'm trying to put that, making sure that that's clear in our motion.
Would you like me to summarize those very quickly?
Well,
Very much.
You discussed a modification to condition number 10 that would clarify that except for the height range that extends up to 81 feet, the mechanicals for all other height ranges would be incorporated within that range. You've added language under the second central campus point that clarifies that the 81 feet includes mechanicals, and the flexibility is still provided if there isn't a way to do that.
That's demonstrated in existing language.
And I think we changed the language of the italics to not recommended, but approved.
Correct.
Correct?
Yeah.
Modifications to condition number 20, as we just spoke about, to clarify that the Phase 1 roadway improvements are at the cost of the hospital, and that they will share in proportionate local costs of any larger project. You added a condition that speaks to security. Consideration shall be given to security on the campus and in the surrounding neighborhoods, both from a design and operational perspective. Those are the changes that I had.
I second that motion.
Discussion?
Discussion if requested.
I have none.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Yes, unanimous. Gentlemen, I would like to just spend a couple of minutes to talk about the advisory council. I was noodling before. Let me save one of these for me. Kathy, let me give you this. Kathy, I'd like to open up for discussion with the commissioners, perhaps a recommendation that we might make to City Council and the City Manager. And I'll read it for you folks, is that appointments, other than the hospital, of course, appointments to the Technical and Design Advisory Committee should include representatives from the following groups: Plan Commission, an individual from Lake Forest Open Lands Association, and an additional 3 to 4 members that are familiar with the surrounding neighborhoods and streetscapes and have expertise in one of the following areas: land planning, design and/or landscape architecture, engineering, and construction. And lastly, perhaps an individual with familiarity with both the hospital campus and city processes, as well as an understanding of long-term community interests.
I would like to see someone be appointed to the board who understands the health concerns as well of developing these sorts of facilities, and not necessarily just affiliated with a hospital. We heard testimony of how important it was and the timing of urgent care and elevators and moving from point A to point B. So I think it'd be incumbent upon us, provided there's that level of expertise in the community, that we have somebody with that knowledge.
How would you wordsmith that, and where would you put it?
I would include it as an additional element. How many people we're going to have on this board? I think we should probably.
You know,
first of all,
we've got. I think
two.
6. I think 6 is one too many, but certainly max of 6.
Kathy, what was the size of the other committee that you described earlier?
I'd say somewhere between 5, 6, 7, something like that.
Did it recommend to any other body, like city council?
Yes, the water treatment plant went through a special use permit process.
So it was an advisory committee?
Mm-hmm. And it worked through much the same. It really looked at what technology our water plant should use, and it explored a variety of technologies and ended up going with the membrane system, which was a cutting-edge system that brought with it some very specific requirements in building design.
Was it open meetings, public included?
The advisory committee would be a city manager appointed group, so that would not be subject to the open meetings law. It doesn't have any decision-making authority.
To me, it's a group that would work with Mr. McAfee and his associates. And they would kind of represent the stakeholders, if you will. So you sit around the board meeting, you hash it around, you agree on some and agree to disagree on others, and you put together a plan, whether it's a landscaping plan or whether it's a traffic study or whether it's a building design, and you come back. And I think it does a couple things. It adds, it makes it, you know who to go to. And there's a sense of consistency in this process moving forward, that these are the subgroup of the city staff, as I said before, city staff, who then keeps the plan commission informed and advised as we move forward and as we change, quite frankly.
Do we have to act on it?
No, I just, for some reason, I apparently was sitting around this afternoon with nothing to do. So I just thought, I knew I had specific thoughts on what I think, is necessary. So maybe we beat this to death already. Yes, no?
I think we have and we haven't, but we did impose height restrictions and said, but if you can prove you can't build this facility with the safety and care of your patients in mind and need to go higher.
Mhm.
We need to know that, and I think that's an important element to what we're gonna do here.
Okay.
And that knowledge, I think someone said earlier, it's understanding it from the inside out. I think that's really important as well, and blending it into the community.
I guess we could have a motion, yeah.
I'd make the motion.
To,
I'd move that we.
Mr. Chairman? Excuse me, may I make one suggestion?
why not?
Please.
You asked the question about your statement, how could we modify the statement? In your statement, you said engineering was one of the categories. If it said health facility engineering, even parenthetically, that would encourage someone named to the group that has some experience in this area.
There you go, that's good. Okay.
Perfect.
You want to come up here? Oh, we got to replace two guys. It's only one night a week, or one night a month.
I'm very appreciative.
Yeah, very good. Well, I wanted to, okay. How about that? All right, recommendation? Yes. Motion? Second?
What's the motion?
To go with that, just as a recommendation to city council and the city manager.
Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Approved, all right. Public testimony on non-agenda items? Motion for adjournment?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Let's go home.